Chapter 295, Half-Step Legendary Realm. Yi Xuan could sense a somewhat keen killing intent in the eyes of Fire Lin Beast. Indeed, there were traces of hatred and greed in its eyes as well. It instinctively considered Yi Xuan an enemy, not to mention Yi Xuan also sensed the presence of powerful divinities within its body, which could bring great benefits for him since he was in need of more and more divinities in order to strengthen his gilded tyrant form. He would usually come across demon beasts with small amounts of divinity within their bodies, but this Fire Lin beast was extraordinary in this regard. Yi Xuan was still considering what to do next, but Fire Lin Beast was obviously not going to give him any opportunity to continue to consider. It immediately roared and shot a large bundle of flames towards Yi Xuan. Yi Xuan immediately went back several steps to avoid the flame attack. The freshly obtained power of the legendary realm was evident in its attack. Just by spitting flames, it could easily burn through space. It was popular saying that it was necessary to face heavenly calamity because the terrifying power of legendary realm lied on the other side of the test. Fuck! Yi Xuan cursed out loud and no longer hesitated. After all, this beast was still injured and would soon be able to recover and might even display full scope of legendary realm. He needed to win this battle as fast as possible. The long blade danced in his hands and released an enormous blade light that instantly split the entire sky into two halves as if attempting to shatter the void. Fire Lin Beast struggled to leap and barely managed to dodge Yi Xuan's blade attack, however, not before getting its scales crushed by the blade light slicing through its waist, causing the blood to ooze out in abundance. Humph! Yi Xuan snorted and immediately raised his hand, summoning a gigantic Hans seal in the sky, and the very next moment, he made it smash down. Like a huge mountain directly dropping from heavens, the Hans seal pounded upon Fire Lin Beast without giving it any chance to escape. Bang! Great strength contained in this attack came close to crushing its bones. With its face upward, it roared loudly while its body emitted blazing white flames that instantly burned through the Hans seal, making it possible for it to escape. But how could Yi Xuan let it escape so easily? Another Hans seal appeared in the sky and once again smashed down. Although it possessed the blood of the mythical unicorn and thus had a strong regenerative capability as well, but the effectiveness of his regenerative ability was nowhere near that of Phoenix regeneration. Right now, Yi Xuan was in his peak condition whereas Fire Lin Beast had not even recovered from the injuries it sustained during the breakthrough. Yi Xuan knew that in spite of having just entered the legendary realm, this beast was much more powerful than that old man. After all, it was a god's descendant with the divine power of ancient unicorn god in its blood. But Yi Xuan was also aware of the fact that a certain period of time, after surviving a heavenly tribulation, was the most dangerous for a demon beast, increasing its chances of being hunted. Yi Xuan certainly didn't get enough time to consider all this since he was fully focused on taking down this Fire Lin Beast. Roar! The beast screamed pitifully after being severely hit by the Hans seal. It staggered a bit as its blood spattered all over. Immediately, its ominous eyes began to stubbornly stare at Yi Xuan. If it was in its peak condition, it would have already killed Yi Xuan by now. But right now, it was basically cornered by a human expert of much lower level. The healing rate of its wounds, caused by the Hans seal, was also very less. Fire Lin Beast was roaring again and again. It was not just furious but also regretting its decision of getting greedy and coveting the divinities within Yi Xuan's body. In the end, its own greed sent him crashing into such a dreadful disaster. Yi Xuan's facial expression appeared cold as he directly shot his palm and summoned an azure dragon from the depths of the abyss. At this moment, the tyrannical power of the fourth layer of tyrant body technique fully manifested itself as he used his long blade to directly chop down the divinities contained within the white flame spat by the beast, while at the same time, his coiling dragon palm made an impact. Boom! Yi Xuan's coiling dragon palm severely pounded on the beast's body. It screamed as its spine was broken into two halves, tearing its skin at that spot, from where scalding hot blood gushed out and stained the ground. It was a good opportunity. Yi Xuan immediately released a massive sword intention that flew across the sky, crashed into its head, cracking open its skull while its brain matter splashed out. Fire Lin Beast was finally dead. Yi Shiwen took out a red demon core from its body. It was a special demon core of legendary realm and was exuding waves of concentrated energy. After passing the heavenly tribulation, it had completely transformed into a demon core of legendary realm. Wonderful. Yi Shiwen, this is a good opportunity to absorb the demon core. I think then you can certainly set foot into the half-step legendary realm. Once you are in half-step legendary realm, that old fogey won't be your match anymore. Yi Mo said. Yi Shiwen nodded. If he could set foot in half-step legendary realm, then the experts of legendary realm wouldn't be a threat anymore, just like the experts of half-step legendary realm were not his match right now. Yi Shiwen immediately found a cave in that area and began closed-door cultivation. This entire area had been destroyed beyond recognition by the heavenly calamity, so concealment was a right decision since the event of heavenly calamity had scared off all demon beasts of that area. They were not daring to approach even if they wanted to. Yi Shiwen made no more delay because he would also need to go back and confirm the safety of the wolf cub and Jian Wuchen. Although he did believe that they must have fled already, he would still want to go back and confirm, not to mention he would also go greet the old man afterward. The red demon core was floating in front of Yi Shiwen, bobbing, and overflowing with energy based on fire element. Yi Shiwen was sitting cross-legged on the ground, with his eyes closed while Tianyuan mirror was constantly circling around above his head, protecting his entire body with a scarlet barrier. His body was exuding waves of golden light, while at the same time, large chunks of fire element were being absorbed into his body. Traces of red color appeared in the blanket of golden light enveloping his body. Although this fire Lin beast had reached legendary realm just now, it must have been accumulating for years, or perhaps decades. Not to mention, it was a god's descendant with the divine fire element within its demon core. As soon as the fire element circulated within his body, it began to make a qualitative change in his Jin Yuan that literally began to rampage inside his body. Yi Shiwen immediately mobilized this new type of Jin Yuan in his meridians and made it his own energy forcibly. Yi Shiwen could clearly feel a considerable change in his Jin Yuan. There was indeed a massive gap between legendary realm and realms beneath it. Legendary realm is really something. Yi Shiwen said with a color of anticipation in his eyes, once I am done completely absorbing this demon core, stepping into half-step legendary realm should be a piece of cake. Yi Shiwen continued to absorb the red-hot demon core and sensed an influx of fire properties in his inner state. His face turned brighter and began to shine, even traces of a mixture of golden and red light flashed in eyes. The powerful fire properties a legendary demon beast immediately started to impact heavily against the barrier to half-step legendary realm. Yi Zaiwen's Jin Yuan saw a significant qualitative and quantitative transformation and began to pound on the inner state barrier again and again. Only by breaking this barrier, he could leap from truth realm to half-step legendary realm. Boom! 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 Yi Shiwen felt as if he was facing a thick iron wall standing between him and half-step legendary realm. This was a very firm threshold that was infamous for blocking countless experts from never stepping out of the truth realm. The newly gained Jin Yuan and its increased quantity were certainly helpful, but Yi Shiwen was still struggling to find a flaw in the barrier while making impacts one after another. He did not know how many times it took, but he finally managed to break the barrier. Boom! The sturdy barrier finally started to collapse. Yi Zaiwen's face suddenly lit up. I did it! My breakthrough was successful. With this, his imposing aura also changed completely. It gained small traces of the peculiar coercion of legendary realm, completely replacing the weak aura of truth realm. Uncontrolled waves of his imposing aura spread out in all directions, only to be blocked in the path by Tianyuan mirror. Yi Zaiwen's golden divine nature also appeared smoother than before. Also, after the breakthrough, he gained a godly aura that contained the magnificent divine coercion. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes and said, finally, I reached half-step legendary realm. Now, it's time to finish some unfinished business. Chapter 296, Conspicuous prestige. An unquenchable look of pleasant surprise appeared in Yi Zaiwen's eyes. He had finally entered half-step legendary realm. The red-colored demon core had all its energy consumed and turned into a pile of dust. He never imagined of stepping into half-step legendary realm in such a short period of time. It took him not more than 6 months to achieve that, and this rate was not slow. One must know that reaching half-step legendary realm at the age of 20 was something not even the so-called peerless geniuses could do before the age of 50. Yi Xuan was not necessarily the youngest, but definitely was one of the youngest to achieve such a feat. He just did not have the means to imagine his own progress, in terms of cultivation, once he would turn 50 years old. Even in his past life, a period of 20 years was not less and was tantamount to be a major part of one's lifespan. This time, his misfortune turned into a blessing at right time and helped him obtain the demon core of a legendary demon beast, helping him reach the next realm in a short time. Yi Xuan stretched his hand and the entire space was imprisoned in an instant. This was the ability of legendary experts, and having entered the half-step legendary realm, he had also come to understand a certain degree of space laws, at least enough to imprison a part of space for some time. Usually, this was possible only after becoming a full-fledged legendary expert and gaining access to freely communicate with the world laws, but Yi Xuan was exposed to it in advance. Regarding the understanding of space, Yi Xuan consciously took the initiative to gain hold of this power, and his control over space laws was certainly not inferior to an average legendary expert because of the presence of mysterious space in his body. Not to mention, now Tianyuan mirror could produce Ling Dawn unceasingly, and they would be constantly instilled into the bottomless pit of mysterious space. As a result of that, the mysterious space would continuously absorb Ling Dawn and help Yi Xuan in an unceasing deduction of some martial laws and techniques. In other words, a variety of world laws would be constantly deduced inside the mysterious space before being installed in Yi Xuan mind. Of course, this process would go on non-stop. Therefore, although Yi Xuan had not yet entered the legendary realm, he was still enjoying the powers and liberties of legendary realm with the help of mysterious space and Tianyuan mirror. Of course, if the opponent was at legendary realm, then the space imprisonment wouldn't have any effect on them. Indeed, Yi Xuan could still use it for self-protection as long as the opponent's skill wasn't too stronger than his own, otherwise, his space imprisonment wouldn't work on the opponent. Not to mention, the opponent should also give up on the idea of imprisoning Yi Xuan because they would have to deal with his insanely fast speed. This was one of the greatest advantages in Yi Xuan's favor. During the breakthrough, his gilded tyrant form also gained no small advantage. Now, his whole body was full of power and he was confident that even a single punch could kill an expert of half-step legendary realm with ease. Yi Xuan, you have made a big progress this time. Yi Mo said, half-step legendary realm, although is only half a step into the legendary realm, it still enjoys the name and benefits of legendary realm. Remember, you are no longer in truth realm, you have left it behind. It should have taken 6 more months under normal circumstances to have this breakthrough. Yes, I never thought that persevering on the road to TMU can actually be good for cultivation. If things continue to go on like this for a year, you can reap tremendous benefits. It is time to find that old man and settle old scores. Yi Xuan said. However, he did not have to go look for the old man because the people of Chiu clan were already looking for him. After the old man thought of going back, he still wasn't sure whether Yi Xuan was really dead or not. What if Yi Xuan was not dead and used some trick to fool him? Therefore, the old man ordered a legendary expert of Chiu clan to lead a team of experts and search for Yi Xuan's corpse. The team consisted of several truth-level experts and all of them were using soul searches to find Yi Xuan or his corpse. The old man was using his soul search technique to command the team of experts, search everywhere, I want to see his corpse. Found him. Suddenly, a small team of experts shouted. Boom! With a sound of terrifying explosion, a blast wave swept off in all directions. The entire team, consisting of truth-level experts, was blasted away. Their bodies instantly turned into blood fog and dissipated in the atmosphere. A rainbow-colored flash of light streamed across the sky. I was planning to look for you, never thought that an old idiot like you can also be so wicked. Yi Xuan said in a calm voice. Yi Xuan's horrifying imposing aura spread in all directions. The old man sensed Yi Zaiwen's aura and his complexion turned pale. He never thought that Yi Zaiwen's aura would change so drastically. He could clearly feel traces of legendary power in Yi Zaiwen's aura. The old man was shocked by the fact that Yi Zaiwen's cultivation had progressed by leaps and bounds in such a short time. This level of insane progression speed was mind-blowing. The old man could tell that by having such an insane level of progression speed, Yi Zaiwen's future prospects would simply be incalculable, not to mention even the tremendous destructive power of heavenly tribulation was unable to kill him. Such a person must be eradicated as soon as possible, otherwise, he would end up being a huge threat to Chiu clan. The only option was to strangle this genius in the cradle itself. Immediately, a bone-chilling killing intention flashed in the old man's eyes. Of course, Yi Xuan didn't give a crap about all that. Little brat, do not dare think that I have forgotten what you did to our Chiu wolf. I did expect you to get killed by the heavenly tribulation, but it doesn't matter. I will kill you myself and take revenge. The old man said coldly. Only, if you have the ability to do that. Yi Xuan grinned. You bastard, I will kill you. A middle-aged expert of half-step legendary realm shouted and flew towards Yi Xuan. He was the father of Chiu Wolf, so his rage was understandable. After all his painstaking efforts in nurturing his son had been wasted by Yi Xuan. The middle-aged man shot an enormous divine beam in the sky that instantly fell down towards Yi Xuan. Yi Xuan sneered, and instead of using any energy-based attacks, he directly went forward to greet the incoming divine beam. Boom! There occurred a massive explosion, but Yi Xuan used just his palms to contain this explosion and rendered it ineffective. Bang! The very next moment, there echoed an extremely violent sound of breaking bones as Yi Xuan used just his hands to crush that expert's bones into pieces. How is this possible? Everyone was shocked by the tyrannical display of physical strength by Yi Xuan. However, Yi Xuan did not give them enough time to figure out what just happened. He immediately summoned a Han seal in the sky and smashed it down towards that expert. Boom! The Han seal smashed down quickly at a lightning-fast speed, directly laminating that expert of half-step legendary realm onto the ground, turning him into blood fog almost instantly. Everyone looked in disbelief, swallowing their saliva, and simply couldn't trust what they just saw. Could the killing of an expert of half-step legendary really be so easy? Yi Xuan suddenly became an awe-inspiring man in the eyes of everyone. Impossible. The old man had an incredible look in his eyes as he stubbornly stared at Yi Xuan. The unexpected rise in Yi Zaiwen's strength was something out of his comprehension. He just couldn't understand how Yi Xuan managed to become so powerful in such a short time. Step back, all of you, I will kill him. The old man roared, then immediately rushed forward and shot his palm, releasing the magnificent powers of legendary realm. A huge green hammer congealed out of nowhere and smashed towards Yi Xuan. The space around Yi Xuan was imprisoned suddenly, making it impossible for him to escape. Yi Xuan sneered and his body released some kind of world law, instigating fluctuations in space around him and making it possible for him to break free from space imprisonment. Yi Zaiwen's joined his golden hands and blocked the hammer attack effortlessly. Old man, prepare yourself, you better embrace death with a smile on your face. Yi Xuan smirked and launched a kick, sweeping rippling waves of golden light toward the old man. The old man was startled, actually did not expect that Yi Xuan would be strong enough to disregard his offensives. Yi Xuan not only broke out of his space confinement, he even blocked his legendary level hammer attack. Yi Xuan summoned an azure coiling dragon from the depths of abyss. After reaching half-step legendary realm, even his coiling dragon attack had progressed by leaps and bounds. Ha! The old man thundered loudly and prepared himself to face Yi Zaiwen's terrifying attack. The two sides collided fiercely as if mutually strangling each other. The crumbling and fluctuating energy waves spread out in all directions. This was a battle between two experts of legendary level. It seemed like a vicious fight between a wolf and a dragon. Yi Zaiwen's golden aura soon occupied half of the sky while the old man seemed to be struggling in a one-on-one fight with him. Today, you go to hell. Yishuan suddenly flew forward such as lightning while his hands transformed into dragon claws and went forward to grasp the old man. This attack was so terrifying that the old man could only dodge and stay out of its range but failed to do so. Boom! The old man screamed pitifully as his body was sent flying upside down. Chapter 297, Legend slaughtered. The old man was sent flying and directly hit the ground, pulling a long trace by being dragged on the ground before finally come to a stop. Yishuan immediate chased him and summoned a Han seal that instantly smashed down. Boom! Han seal directly pounded upon the old man, giving him no time to dodge. Bang! The old man had managed to steer out of the Han seal's main impact area, but was still hit at the edge and was once again sent flying. There was no way to find out how many of his bones were crushed in the process. Stop! At this moment, several truth-level experts and an expert of half-step legendary realm of Chiu clan rushed forward to save the old man because they knew his importance for their family. They, as if, made a barrier of experts to protect the old man. As long as the old man would come out alive of this tragedy, the future of their clan would be secured. On the contrary, if the old man were to die, then their entire clan. They did not dare to imagine. Several truth-level experts rushed toward Yishuan to pin him down, but he was radically unmoved. He continued to chase the old man. The golden divinities contained within his body were literally mocking humanity. An otherworldly golden energy burst out of Yizaiwan's body and turned into a long blade. In a blink of an eye, several truth-level experts were chopped to pieces by this golden blade. Boom! 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 Some experts were beheaded, some were split in half, and all in all, no one was able to stop the advance of Yizaiwan's footsteps. You beast, no matter how big a price I must pay today, I will kill you. The half-step legendary experts roared, his palm transformed into a wolf claw and grasped toward Yishuan. It was like the claw of the wolf god, attempting to squash Yishuan. As if trying to trod the vault of heaven and reshuffled the very existence of elements. I would like to see you try. Yishuan smirked and shot an enormous golden beam to tackle the wolf claw. Stab! With a loud piercing sound, Yishuan's hands directly tore open the wolf claw. Aya! Yishuan didn't stop there. The half-step legendary expert's body was then immediately caught by Yishuan in midair and was split into two halves, with blood splattering all around. Even his soul was directly torn apart by Yishuan along with his body. This is what happens when a soul comes in the grasp of godly power. You bastard! The old man roared as she painstakingly saw yet another elite from his clan getting brutally killed by Yishuan. He got so mad that he immediately rushed toward Yishuan. The old man's whole body had started to swell with surging energy and boiling blood. The broken bones and torn muscles within his body started to reconnect at an astonishing rate. His imposing aura literally soared high into the sky, and the awe-inspiring changes in his body made him appear like a raging beast. Yishuan, this is bad. I think he has gone suicidal and is planning to perish along with you. Yimo said in an anxious tone. Yimo's comment was not needed for Yishuan to figure out what the old man was planning to do. After all, Yishuan had killed Chiu Wolf and two other elites from the old man's clan, along with several truth-level experts. Not to mention, the massacre was still going on. The old man was forced to take desperate measure to save what was left of his clan. Ha! Suddenly, the old man thundered loudly. The whole sky began to boil as he congealed a bladiki in his hand and swept it across the sky. The surviving members of Chiu clan couldn't help but hold their breaths when they saw this scene. Clang! With the intermittent bursts of metal rubbing sound produced from friction between the bladiki and atmosphere. Die, you bastard! Bladiki arrived right in front of Yishuan obliquely in a blink of an eye, and he could feel that it brought the entire space rolling along with it. Yishuan immediately waved his right arm, congealing an equally terrifying bladiki along with a gigantic coiling dragon, and shot both these attacks toward the incoming bladiki attack. Boom! A loud explosion occurred, setting off a storm of rogue energy waves in all directions, violently twisting and shattering the space around. The members of Chiu clan immediately retreated far away from the place where that terrible collision occurred. They knew that getting in range of such a collision was like asking for death. Just die, die. The old man's facial expression became more ferocious, crazier. His eyes had turned red, keeping a close eye on Yishuan while congealing a bladiki much powerful and much purer than before, in his hands. This time, the bladiki contained a great roaring wolf made up of inexhaustible energy. The old man had combined two types of attacks into one to make the final attack much more destructive. The resulting attack appeared unusually brilliant and beautiful in the sky. The combined attack of Bladiki and Heavenly Great Wolf completely engulfed Yishuan. Ha ha ha, little beast, now you will die without a doubt. The old man's facial expression turned grim as he laughed loudly like a madman. Get out of my way. Yishuan shouted in a cold voice, and the entire barrier of energy enveloping Yishuan instantly collapsed. A beam of golden light flushed out from the Bladiki barrier, tearing it apart in the process and further crashed into the great wolf's body, annihilating it almost instantly. Impossible. The old man couldn't believe his eyes because he was absolutely sure that his most powerful attack would kill Yishuan. Not to mention, he had unlocked his full potential and was at his peak condition while launching this attack. He certainly didn't know that Yishuan had a trick to restore himself to the peak condition in a blink of an eye. The old man panicked and immediately flew back far away, but not faster than the golden beam shot by Yishuan. Yishuan had immediately released a golden blade attack, but this time made up of a mixture of divinities and dragon chi. The hybrid energy was insanely destructive, powerful enough to shock the entire world. The old man quickly congealed a series of defensive arrangement, made up of Zhenyuan, in front of himself. However, a barrier made up of mere Zhenyuan couldn't stop Yizaiwan's attack that easily shattered the barrier. Bang! 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 As soon as the Zhenyuan barrier was shattered, the old man immediately went several steps back to evade the Bladiki attack but failed to do so in time. Puchi! His right arm was severed, spattering bone dust and minced meat debris in all directions. The old man's body wasn't able to avoid the heavy impact contained in the attack and was severely knocked to the ground, creating a large humanoid hole in the ground. Hans seal. Yishuan immediately summoned the Hans seal that appeared in the form of a huge mountain falling from the sky. The old man wanted to resist but lacked enough speed and agility to dodge the Hans seal's impact. In a flash, he was crushed to dead by Hans seal. Even his soul didn't survive this impact and dissipated. The remaining experts of Chiu clan immediately understood that getting out of there was the only option left in front of them. In their eyes, Yishuan appeared just like a devil god that had effortlessly and mercilessly killed all the powerhouses of their clan. But before they could flee, the entire surrounding space was imprisoned, freezing them in midair. Yishuan used Missing Moon Beheader technique and unleashed 1,000 blades, chopping all of them into pieces. It just took Yishuan an instant to wipe out the entire clan. Although Yishuan was not yet a full-fledged legendary expert, he had already learned to exploit some of its benefits. His understanding of space imprisonment technique was not at all inferior to that of other legendary experts. Yishuan, I must say that your current strength is comparable to that of an expert of half-step legendary first stage. Only a few peerless geniuses are able to reach the first stage of half-step legendary realm. Yi-Mo said. This is not enough. Yishuan said, I want to beat all the opponents, and become the strongest. Only after becoming the strongest, he would have the opportunity to make contact with the outside world. Then only it would be possible to one day return to the earth. Yishuan, without any delay, directly expanded his devil wings and flew toward Shunan City in order to find the whereabouts of the wolf cub and Jian Wuchen. He went back and found out that those two had already fled away. Yishuan felt relieved, though he did not know where they were headed. However, considering the power and disposition of Wolf Cub and Jian Wuchen, they must have safely escaped from Shunan Prefecture. Yishuan also believed that he would not be getting any news about them anytime soon. Chapter 298, overbearing army of God Yi Xuan was following the road to Tmu, the same road that had been used by generations of geniuses for thousands of years. Although Yi Xuan had the choice of flying, he preferred to walk in order to learn more about Ming Empire and its culture, not to mention his walk was equally fast. In just a month on his journey, he experienced local customs and social traditions, which was a lot better than reading 10,000 books on Ming Empire. During this month, Yi Xuan learned a lot about Ming Empire. Since he was not struggling to catch up, he had basically fallen behind Jian Wuqian and the wolf cub. However, he often heard news about the exploits of the two on the way. He recently heard news about the wolf cub having stepped into half-step legendary realm and had torn apart a young elite of Ming Empire who was also at half-step legendary realm but still didn't stand a chance against the wolf cub's tyrannical powers. Although Yi Xuan hadn't personally seen wolf cub in action, judging from the information received, he could tell that they must have tried to belittle him by making fun of his skills, ultimately making him go berserk and massacre all the way. After surviving a life-and-death battle with the assassin, Jian Wuqian benefited a lot and managed to step into half-step legendary realm. His progression speed was indeed very fast as Yi Xuan had predicted. This month, Yi Xuan constantly consolidated his inner state, reaching all the way to the pinnacle of half-step legendary realm. Of course, his acquired knowledge and sensibility had already gone far beyond half-step legendary realm, thanks to the energy and knowledge accumulated in the library. Also, now Tianyuan Mirror was producing a lot of Ling Dawn every day, half getting instilled into mysterious space to comprehend various martial techniques and world laws while the remaining half getting absorbed by Yi Xuan. In just 1 month, Yi Xuan had completely consolidated his inner state to its peak level. Yi Xuan arrived before a vast mountain range. According to the ancient road map, he found out that there stood a big city on the other side of this mountain range. There were several routes that could be taken to go to Tmu, each having a dedicated map. So each time Tmu opened its gate to recruit disciples, some people, who knew the routes, would start selling maps to the contestants. Of course, some routes were riddled with dangers while some were relatively easy to traverse, hence, the costs of these maps varied accordingly. Yi Xuan didn't care about their prices or difficulty to traverse and bought the one that was most detailed. Clang! A metal clanging sound resounded in the forest, followed by sudden dispersion of clouds in the sky. Boom! A sword key suddenly flew across the sky and came very close to hitting, almost grazing Yi Xuan's side. The dense forest was also split in half by the terrifying sword key. Yi Xuan saw the figures of 2 persons dashing away from the source of sword key attack. One of them was a man who appeared in his late 20s, was dressed in black clothes and had a handsome face, but there was a huge wound in his chest. One could even vaguely see the broken ribs, indicating that the injury was quite serious. At his side, there was a beautiful woman who appeared to be in her early 20s, had a blinding black hair. At this time, she was experiencing shortness of breath, her complexion was red but did not have any visible injuries. Mo Yen, Mo Xiang, you 2 siblings better hand over the sword command, otherwise, you won't escape death today. About a dozen warriors, each one at complete truth realm and clad in strange uniforms, were standing behind those siblings. This group was being led by an expert of half-step legendary realm. He was a tall and sturdy man and was holding a long sword in hand. God's army is at work, a loitering passerby like you should mind your own business. Now get lost. The half-step legendary warrior glanced at Yi Xuan and said. Yi Xuan was not planning to interfere in the first place. However, the leader of God's army suddenly waved his sword and shot a sword key toward Yi Xuan. Yi Xuan dodged to the side and effortlessly evaded this attack. He looked at the siblings and saw fear in their eyes, as if they wanted someone to help them but wouldn't ask because they didn't want him to get involved in this mess. Those who interfere in the matters of God's army shall die. The leader coldly said. Without any hesitation, he once again shot a bright sword key toward Yi Xuan. Humph, your arrogance is praiseworthy. Yi Xuan said, then directly grabbed the sword key and crushed it. On the way to Tmu, he had learned a lot of things, of course, God's army being one of the things that caught his attention. Army of God was an organization quite well known in this area with the idea of representing the so-called Army of God itself. It was established by 5 formidable young experts who referred to themselves as 5 gods. They gathered a large number of followers by defeating numerous strong and well-known geniuses from all over and then compelled them to join their army, just like the 8th prince used to operate in Great U State. However, the 8th prince wasn't as powerful as the 5 gods. "How dare you stand in our way, you are courting death." An expert of complete truth realm instantly appeared in front of Yishuan and blasted a punch, distorting the space itself with a burst of colossal power. It could be said that even an ordinary member of God's army was much more powerful than average experts of complete truth realm. "You messed up." Yishuan smirked and Jin Yuan instantly began to surge out of his body and enveloped him completely. Poof! Yishuan shoved his hands into his chest and tore him apart. "Are you going to pick a fight with the army of God? You have a death wish." The leader stared coldly at Yishuan. His complexion wasn't good because he could tell that Yishuan was very strong. He did not dare to underestimate Yishuan. "Army of God is already dead in my eyes." Yishuan replied in a calm voice. "And you and your subordinates are the ones that started this." Yi Zaiwen's reply immediately angered the leader. The god's army was like a supreme existence in his heart, and allowing others to belittle it was nothing less than blasphemy. Boom! He pounded his foot on the ground, and like a flash of lightning, he rushed toward Yishuan while unleashing a rolling sword ki at him. Yishuan took out his long blade and chopped toward the enemy, releasing a golden bladiki that instantly transformed into a roaring golden dragon. Boom! Along with a dreadful loud metal clanging sound, enormous waves of energy were set off in all directions. The leader was instantly gobbled by the golden dragon, tearing him to shreds. Even his soul was not spared in the process. The brother and sister were looking at Yishuan with utter disbelief in their eyes. Although this leader was at half-step legendary realm, he was powerful enough to contend with an expert of legendary first stage. However, he was so effortlessly killed by Yishuan. Of course, they knew that the army of God only recruited top geniuses from the younger generation, so a team leader was certainly going to be elite among elites. Not to mention, he was at half-step legendary realm and was directly under the command of the 5 gods, but was still killed in a blink of an eye by just a blade attack. All in all, Yishuan was insanely strong. Scram! Yishuan shouted. The members of God's army were stubbornly staring at Yishuan and did not dare to approach him. They had already realized that Yishuan was far stronger than them, perhaps on the same level as their 5 gods. Yishuan did not mean to exterminate them. After all, these were just prisoners in the army of gods. Yishuan had heard a lot of things about the tyrannical presence of the 5 gods. It was said that only few could rival their strength in the younger generation. Although everyone wanted to be the strongest in the younger generation of southern region, it was rare for someone to be daring enough to claim such a bold thing. Although there were many legends about the 5 gods, no one actually knew about their specific strength levels. However, there were rumors that the first god was at half-step legendary 3rd or 4th stage, and has an awe-inspiring military experience of 50 years as a warrior commander. It was said that had not set foot on the road to TMU because when the representatives of TMU evaluated his qualifications, they decided to have him as a disciple, but he refused. He chose to embark on this road with the rhetoric that he would beat all the geniuses of the younger generation and become the first person to enter TMU via assessment. Even if the other 4 gods were weaker than him, they were still powerful enough to stand above an expert of half-step legendary realm who was just now killed by Yishuan. However, now that Yishuan had offended them already, he would rather go all the way and beat them one by one. He was striving to be at the top and would need to defeat all his rivals sooner or later. At this time, Mo Yen and Mo Xiang arrived next to Yishuan and said, "Kind brother, thanks for saving us siblings. We will always be grateful to you for this." Chapter 299, Dragon Essence. Yishuan turned around to face the 2 siblings. The young male Mo Yen said, "I am Mo Yen, this is my little sister Mo Xiang, we are deeply grateful to you for saving our lives. It was no big deal. Yishuan certainly would not say that he wasn't planning to interfere in the beginning, but had to when the members of God's army attacked him for no reason. I am probably taking the liberty to ask you, but why are the members of God's army after you too? Yishuan asked. You don't know what's going on. Mo Yen looked strangely at Yishuan and asked. I just came here, so do not know much. Yishuan replied. I see. Mo Yen nodded then said, it is not a big surprise that there is a big city located behind this mountain range. It is called Wing City and was originally a huge martial school with its own small world, which is rumored to have been concealing a lot of heavenly treasures. And there is this one kind of treasures that can help an expert from directly jumping from half-step legendary realm to the legendary realm. It's called Dragon Essence. Dragon Essence? Yishuan was suddenly startled because he also knew about Dragon Essence being the legacy left behind after the death of Dragon Arteries. The so-called Dragon Arteries were a kind of spiritual arteries but were considered top-level among spiritual pulses. They not only contained adequate link but also brought strong destiny. An ordinary spiritual artery allowed the survival of an entire school and its prosperity, but a dragon artery did it several times better by granting a significant rise in cultivation by providing rich lingqi for cultivation, and most importantly, also granted strong destiny to the school built around it. If a small school could obtain a formidable dragon artery, it could help them in becoming great, not to mention the destiny of the school would be stronger as well. However, anything that lives in this world dies eventually. Everything that starts has an inevitable end. In this case, the death of a dragon artery leads to the birth of dragon essence. Although dragon essence is just the leftover of dragon arteries, it is definitely a high-tier heavenly treasure and is precious enough to make experts of half-step legendary realm directly make a leap to legendary realm. Of course, the benefits are not just this much. It can cleanse the human bone marrow, turning it into spirit bones and giving an enormous advantage to the practitioner. Not to mention, if a cultivator used dragon essence to cultivation, they can absorb its underlying destiny and enhance his own by leaps and bounds. Now, one could imagine the preciousness of dragon essence. In fact, even a major force like Yi Yuan School won't give a dragon essence to its disciples because Yi Yuan School is built over just a single mesh of dragon arteries, and if and when it dies, Yi Yuan School will not be far from decline. And when the complete deterioration takes place, there will be a possibility of a dragon essence emerging as its legacy. And you have to be a super faction to have the possibility of leaving behind dragon essence after deterioration because when dragon arteries die, the overall structural mesh of arteries shrink crazily and most small dragon arteries would just disappear without a trace, leaving nothing behind. Only a few super dragon arteries of gigantic size and potential have a possibility of leaving behind dragon essence as the legacy. And once it happens, it causes countless experts to compete over its legacy. Yes, the dragon essence is going to be born soon, but in order to enter the small world where it is going to appear, one needs a sword command. There are a total of 8 sword commands and only when all of them in a place, the gate to the small martial world can be opened. Mo Yen said, and I happen to have one such sword command, so the army of God chased me down to kill me and my sister and snatch it from us. Now we are willing to offer this sword to you, big brother. Would you be willing to have it? Mo Yen said and handed over a double-edged small sword to Yishuan. There were delicate-looking patterns on the sword and it was hard to tell what material it was made up of, however, it was exuding a strange glow. You do not want it? Yishuan asked. Even without this sword, people can go in when the gate to the small world opens. But a humble expert like me has such a precious sword, it is bound to invoke jealousy among men and me and my sister may not be able to survive another siege. Mo Yen openly said, after all, he couldn't hide the fact that he was just an expert of complete truth realm and was competing with many formidable experts. So, it was better for the sword to stay with a powerful deterrent like Yishuan. In fact, a while ago, he was very close to handing over the sword command to the army of God in order to survive. After all, even if he and his sister had managed to escape, the news about them having a sword command would have leaked anyway. He naturally understood that staying away from a sword command was the only way to stay out of trouble. As long as you allow us siblings to follow you into the small martial world, we will be satisfied. Mo Yen explained. Such being the case, I would not refuse. Yi Shiwen said and took the sword command. He certainly wouldn't mind having a key to a treasure trove. After all, taking the initiative would still be in his command. He could either choose to be active or passive about it. Now that he had decided to compete for Dragon Essence, he wouldn't be hesitant about being proactive. Mo Yen and Mo Xiang rested for some time, then all of them crossed the mountain and arrived at Wing City. This city was much larger than Shunan and was considered among one of the 50 great cities of Ming Empire. The giant city had erected towering walls and magnificent buildings, enough to make it no less grand than an imperial city. They entered the city, found an inn, and after settling in, they went to a restaurant. In the restaurant, they heard people talking about martial art relic everywhere. One must know that this martial art vestige was much more precious than the 4 sacred beasts' secret technique of the 8th prince. Gee, the news about martial vestige has attracted many experts to our city. Yes, it is Dragon Essence after all. The experts who want to step into Legendary Realm are naturally attracted to it. In fact, even experts, who are already in Legendary Realm, can level up with the help of Dragon Essence. The top players of the younger generation are going to compete for it. You are talking about the Army of God, aren't you? I hear that its members have been searching for sword commands everywhere. Also, the 5th god has personally come into action to obtain the Dragon Essence. I think they are too arrogant. Even if the 5 gods are strong experts, they shouldn't underestimate other top experts of the younger generation. True, a lot of the members of God's army were killed by formidable experts. That is why the 5th god had to personally step in to collect the sword commands. Army of God is really an unusual organization with 5 gods, each ranked according to their strength level. But even the 5th god, the lowest ranked god and youngest among all, is at the peak of half-step Legendary Realm. 2 days ago, he killed a veteran of Legendary Realm. This is simply insane. Hey, but did you not hear that there is a monster wolf that had a verbal fight with him? Hey, I have heard about a notorious wolf or some kind of dog. Its reputation has spread far and wide in this region, but I did not expect it to mess with God's army as well. A day before yesterday, the 5th god blocked its path and tried to tame it, but it used some kind of insanely fast agility technique. Even the 5th was unable to catch it, even if he is actually at Legendary 1st stage. Yi Shiwen immediately thought, is it not the wolf cub they are talking about? Army of God is really out of luck. They do not know that they have messed with the wrong beast and their destruction is evident. Yi Shiwen looked happy. Mo Yen and Mo Xiang saw him suddenly turn happy and did not know what happened to liven up his mood. Then, suddenly, the atmosphere in the entire restaurant got tense. Humph, you wimps dare to discuss the army of God and look down on us. It seems you do not want to live anymore. At this time, a few experts got up from their chairs. One could see Army of God embroidered on their uniforms. Immediately, there was a pin-drop silence in the restaurant. Now, no one dared to speak a word as they did not dare to face the overbearing dominance of the Army of God. Annoying the Army of God was no different than being suicidal. A group of insignificant and talkative idiots think that they are capable enough to judge us. Army of God is an absolute entity. Those who will try to speak or act against us shall perish. A member of the Army of God said and glanced at the crowd with a cold look in his eyes. This was the typical way of how the Army of God operated in this city, not to mention no one dared to challenge them. Everybody, listen up. The monster wolf has appeared outside the city and all our brother of God's army have gone out to catch it. Suddenly, a voice sounded and informed everyone about the appearance of the wolf cub. Well, that monster wolf is really courting death. Let's go. The members immediately turned into streamers of light and flew outside the city. Yi Shiwen sneered and shook his head. These members of the Army of God were nothing but truth-level experts, whereas the wolf cub was already at half-step Legendary Realm. They were going toward their own doom. Chapter 300, The fifth god appears. At this time, the well-uniformed members of God's army were flying all over the city. Yi Shiwen finally got up and set out of the restaurant. Although he was finally going to meet the wolf cub, he was not in a rush and appeared to be going at his own pace. He was not willing to interfere because he knew that there was no need to do so in the first place. "Brother Yi, are you going to take a look?" Mo Yen looked at Yi Shiwen and said. Yi Shiwen had killed a half-step legendary member of the army of God, and there was a possibility that he was on their hit list now, even if he had killed all the witnesses. However, it was the best for them to stay away from the army of God. "Yes, I am going to meet a good friend of mine. You two can wait here," Yi Shiwen said. "No, please let us come with you." Mo Yen secretly clenched his teeth and said. Yi Shiwen smiled, thought that Mo Yen was quite courageous. Even after knowing the possibility of bumping into the fifth god, he still dared to go with Yi Shiwen. Perhaps, Mo Yen was worried about the treasure that was now in Yi Ziwen's possession. The three of them flew out of the city along with several streamers of lights. The sky above the city was filled with figures of experts flying at incredible speeds. Yi Shiwen and the other two soon arrived at an open field that was encircled by a large group of experts, mostly the members of the army of God. A large number of experts were floating in the sky and watching from the sidelines. "Damn you, dog demon, you will die today," a skinny member of God's army said while staring at the wolf cub who was standing in the center of the field. Yi Shiwen noticed that the wolf cub had grown up significantly, almost reaching up to his chest, and contrary to the rumors, his strength level was already rivaling that of legendary experts. "Fuck you. You are a dog, your entire family is the lowest breed of dogs," the wolf cub suddenly shouted with anger boiling in his eyes. The onlookers immediately started to laugh aloud, thinking that this wolf demon beast was definitely stupid. "You are all talk but no action. The only thing you are good at is running away, but today, you can forget that as well. I will first skin you, then pull out your muscles and crush your bones," the skinny expert said in a provocative tone. "You think this prince will escape? I'm right here, show me what you got." The wolf cub smiled and proudly said. He did not seem afraid of being surrounded by so many experts because his agility skill was very mysterious. In fact, without relying on the speed boost from the devil wings, even Yi Shiwen wouldn't be able to catch up with the wolf cub's speed, even the so-called fifth god was unable to catch him. "Everybody, today we will butcher this dog and eat a pot full of dog meat curry. Begin," said the skinny expert, and immediately, dozens of members of God's army sprang toward the wolf cub. Boom! The wolf cub opened its mouth wide and spat out a rotating divine beam that rushed forward as if piercing the expansive sky, sweeping away everything in its way. Puff! 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 Several members of the army of God were directly vaporized by the divine beam, not giving them any chance to approach the wolf cub. "Shitty demon beast, die already." The skinny expert blasted a punch, unleashing a burst of surging Zhen Yuan towards the wolf cub. Humph! Heavenly wolf howling moon. The wolf cub snorted then muttered something, after which, he turned his face upward toward the sky and howled. His whole body was enveloped in an ominous aura as the moon instantly started to change color. The sky was dark a moment ago, but a perfectly round bright moon rose up in the sky, showering beautiful yet ominous moonlight everywhere. Under the illumination of moonlight, the wolf cub galloped forward. The earth began to vibrate vigorously, and in a blink of an eye, he arrived in front of the skinny expert, opened his mouth and swallowed the Zhen Yuan attack at point-blank range. Then immediately stretched his claws and grabbed that skinny expert. Poochie! The skinny expert was instantly torn into two parts, his blood splattering everywhere, bone chips flying off in the air. An expert of half-step legendary realm had been directly torn apart. The skinny expert died on the spot, shocking many experts who were watching this scene. The wolf cub glanced at the skinny expert's corpse that was now in two parts, and said in his usual foul-mouthed manner, "Now go cook a pot of your bitch sister's meat in hell, you shitty dog." Everyone was terrified by this scene. After all, an expert of half-step legendary realm was brutally butchered in front of their eyes, without even getting a chance to fight back. This wolf was really a monster. One must know that on this road, the experts of half-step legendary realm were considered extremely extraordinary figures, powerful enough to run amok in any city of this region. Not to mention, the army of God was famous for having strict recruitment process with very harsh standards, with no scope of non-elites becoming a member. All members of the God's army were considered pure elites. An expert of half-step legendary realm was definitely an outstanding character but still failed to last even a moment in front of the wolf monster. This wolf monster was formidable to what extent? Was it already an expert of half-step legendary first stage? This wolf demon beast is a monster. Damn, look at its strength level. It can easily contend with the top players of the younger generation. Yes, but I don't know. Maybe the fifth god will personally move into action. It would be a lot of fun to watch a battle between them. Catch him! A member of the army of gods suddenly shouted frantically. Several experts of half-step legendary realm rushed toward the wolf cub at once. This organization of Army of God was indeed one of the best organized groups known to Yishuan. There were actually only a few good half-step legendary experts in the group, but each had unimaginable cultivation depth. Yishuan hadn't come across any other organization so well-trained and well-structured. As a fellow expert, he truly felt respect for the founder of the Army of God. Humph! An expert of half-step legendary realm suddenly punched toward the wolf cub, smashing the space into multiple pieces in the process. The wolf cub suddenly jumped upward and turned into a streamer of light, avoiding the encirclement entirely. The members simply had no way to catch him. On the contrary, he started killing the members one after another. Many onlookers were secretly surprised. The wolf cub's agility skill was not ordinary. No wonder he went as far as picking a fight with an entire team of God army. So it seemed like the rumor about the fifth god failing to catch him was not fake. Hey, you idiots are too slow, just like turtles. The wolf cub made no concessions while ridiculing them. Yishuan looked at the wolf cub and noticed that there had been a tremendous change in his agility skill and overall speed. He could tell that these experts were not fast enough to catch up with the wolf cub. In fact, he himself would need to use his devil wings to match the wolf cub's speed. Humph! At this time, a loud voice resounded in the sky and a big hand stretched down from above, turned into an insanely sturdy cage and tried to trap the wolf cub. Damn it, a surprise attack. The wolf cub suddenly cursed and immediately flew several dozen feet away. He successfully went out of the range of that cage. Boom. The cage crashed into the ground and created a huge crater. Although the wolf cub escaped, the enemy was obviously not ready to give up. Another cage fell down from high altitude, right upon the wolf cub. Boom! 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 With a loud roar, cages fell down to the ground one after another. Fifth god, you bastard, you shouldn't have appeared in front of me. The wolf cub yelled but did not have the means to maintain a cool look on his face. On the contrary, he was in complete distress right now. Fifth god. Fifth god has arrived. Where is he? Are you telling me the fifth god has arrived at Yangon City? This monster wolf is so dead now. I heard that the fifth god has taken a fancy to this wolf demon and wants to have it as a pet, but did not expect that it would be so formidable. He had to face a lot of trouble and still wasn't able to tame it. I think the fifth god is going to slaughter this wolf monster. The fifth god's popularity was simply off the charts. Being the lowest-ranked god, he was approachable and was similar to a role model for all junior members of the organization who looked up to him and wanted to be like him. A stalwart figure came out from the void. His facial features made him appear quite domineering, with his black hair fluttering in the wind. The golden robe was really complementing his tall stature as he was overlooking the world like a real god from ancient times. This was the infamous expert of the god's army, the fifth god. I hope you are prepared to die, little one. The fifth god looked at the wolf cub with an ice-cold look flashing in his eyes. You are courting death. The wolf cub roared, who do you think you are, eh? You are no god, your title is nothing but shit. I have seen much stronger individuals than you and even they do not dare to claim to be some god. You better not bite off more than you can chew. Humph. The fifth god did not say anything, just stretched out his big hand that got bigger and bigger while going toward the wolf cub. Chapter 301, Hand-to-hand fight. A big hand instantly shrouded the sky and went toward the wolf cub to grab him. Yishuan, just act already. What are you waiting for? The wolf cub hastily called out. He had spotted Yishuan in the crowd long time ago. Yishuan smiled and thought, this wolf cub is really very smart and astute. Of course, he wouldn't keep the wolf cub waiting any longer and instantly moved into action. His killing intention immediately flashed and spread out in all directions, instantly blotting out the sky and overwhelming the fifth god's aura. Who is this man, daring to challenge the fifth god? This question cropped up in everyone's hearts as they just couldn't dare to believe that someone would dare to challenge the fifth god. After all, they would never dare to stand in the way of the fifth god. The reason was simple, going against the fifth god meant instant death. Boom! The golden divine nature of Yishuan was just like a golden tide that blotted out the sky and swept across in all directions. The fifth god's big hand happened to be in the way of this destructive golden tide and was directly annihilated, turning into Lingqi before dissipating into thin air. Everyone saw a blue figure floating above the golden tide and overlooking the fifth god. Yizaiwen's cold eyes were staring at the fifth god. The wolf cub was sitting cross-legged beside him in midair. Yishuan had painted the world golden within moments. Now, the surrounding area looking like a portrait made up of gold, like a true masterpiece painted by God himself. Who are you? How dare you stand in the way of the army of God? The fifth god stared back at Yishuan and said in a loud voice. Army of God, you say? Never heard of it, am I supposed to care? Yishuan replied with a smile. God? Are you trying to tell this year's funniest joke or something? Yishuan said and burst into laughter. At this time, the onlookers faintly recognized the hidden meaning of his words, claiming to be God was overly rampant. Those daring to use the name of God according to their convenience were definitely too arrogant to reason with, but the truth was undeniable that this organization was very strong, and on this route, no one dared to act against the army of God. Even the wolf cub came almost close to getting captured by them. When facing just one was so dangerous, there were 5 of them in total. Are you suicidal? The fifth god replied without losing his cool as intended by Yishuan. Seeing the wolf cub arrive beside Yishuan was certainly making him furious. Yishuan, you have to be careful, he is very strong. The wolf cub said. Even if he had this insanely insolent personality, he still was honest and said that the fifth god was very strong. Right now, he was recovering and knew well that he was not an opponent of the fifth god. The wolf cub didn't need to state the obvious because Yishuan could tell the same from the fifth god's imposing aura that was cutting through the sea of his golden energy like sharp blades and rushing toward him. Boom! Yizaiwen's clothes were fluttering under the terrifying coercion blowing from the other side. For an average expert of half-step legendary realm, staying in the way of such a dreadful pressure could literally run them over and crush them to death. Yishuan emitted golden divinities from his body and instantly neutralized the dreadful pressure. The spectators who were watching this scene suddenly held their breaths and then immediately retreated far away. They did not want to stay in the range while a collision between the 2 dreadful imposing auras was taking place. After witnessing Yizaiwen's strength firsthand, even the fifth god's face revealed a dignified expression. He could already tell that Yishuan was going to be a very strong opponent. Aren't you known as God? What happened? Use your godly powers and try again, loser. After having the support of Yishuan, the wolf cub started to clamor immediately. The fifth god's cold eyes stared at Yishuan and the wolf cub and he instantly rushed forward, cutting right through the golden tide. A long halberd appeared in his hands. This was the first time he was resorting to using a weapon against an opponent. In fact, even while contending with an old expert over a sword command few days ago, he did not need to use a weapon. However, while facing Yi Shiwen, he had to resort to using his halberd that had a mysterious glowing pattern carved in it. Although no one knows who the fifth god really is, it can be said that he is among the top players of the younger generation. That is why he managed to obtain the title of fifth god. Many older experts of half-step legendary first stage have tried to snatch this title from him but couldn't even force him to use his weapon. Yes, the halberd you see in his hands is rumored to be a weapon of God and is said to have infinite might. A weapon used by the god. This is definitely impossible because nobody knows whether there is God in this world or not. We just read about gods in our extraordinary history, that's all. The halberd shot instantly like a sharp blade with unparalleled speed and made a path by cutting the space in half, just like a picture scroll being torn into two pieces. Such a stunning attack released boundless coercion in all directions, forcing the spectators to further retreat and move out of the range, otherwise, they would have to face the risk of getting chopped to pieces. Yi Zaiwen's body was instantly covered with golden divinities as he gave a loud shout and directly rushed forward, trampling the space on the way and blasted a punch toward the halberd. Boom! There sounded a terrifying metal clanging noise along with a massive explosion that set off waves of rogue energy in all directions, ravishing anything in its way. Yi Shiwen stood uninjured with only a trace of white scratch on his golden fist that healed almost instantly. Yi Shiwen was in high spirits as his battling intention was soaring constantly. After stepping into the half-step legendary realm, he finally met a worthy opponent to test the limits of his own strength. Extremely arrogant. Fifth god exclaimed with a cold facial expression painted on his face. He waved his halberd once and suddenly unleashed an enormous burst of condensed energy toward Yi Shiwen with a boom. Yi Shiwen was no longer polite and instantly rushed past the incoming attack while simultaneously unleashing a sea of golden divinities toward his opponent. Boom! The two sides collided in the sky and led to an enormous collision that set off tremendous blast waves everywhere which mutually submerged the two in the process. The two golden figures instantly collided once again. Yi Zaiwen's monstrous palm attack pressed down like a mountain and instantly crashed into the fifth god's equally massive mountainous palm attack. The two mountains severely collided and crumbled into an enormous ocean of energy. Boom! The two figures detached from each other and a stream of blood splashed out from the wound that was torn open in Yi Zaiwen's palm by the fifth god's halberd. Yi Shiwen did not say anything, just looked at the fifth god with an ice-cold expression on his face. The phoenix regeneration instantly repaired his wound while he thought in his heart that this halberd was really no ordinary weapon. He had already practiced gilded tyrant form to the 4th layer and even an expert of half-step legendary first stage should find it very difficult to injure his gilded body. Yi Shiwen never thought that his gilded body would actually be injured. In fact, if it was an ordinary expert in place of him, they would have been split in half already. Yi Shiwen did not know that the fifth god was even more surprised. He rarely resorted to using his halberd, but when he did, it brought instant death to his opponents. But this time, his halberd managed to pull out a minor wound on his opponent's palm. This was already beyond his imagination. Fifth god's complexion was pale as he glanced at Yi Shiwen, seemed to consider something then said, "Next time, I will take your life." After that, the fifth god left with his forces while the spectators continued to watch this scene in bewilderment. They just couldn't understand why would the fifth god just leave like that. Could it be that he was actually afraid of Yi Shiwen? This was not right. After all, everyone watched the battle from beginning and it never seemed like the fifth god was falling under the wind. Both of them appeared equally matched and Yi Shiwen was even injured a bit. Such being the case, how could the fifth god miss this opportunity to teach Yi Shiwen a lesson? Nobody knew what the fifth god was thinking, they had no precise answer. Yi Shiwen did not stop the departure of the fifth god because the small world had not yet opened, so a death match with the fifth god wouldn't be worthwhile anyway. Moreover, during the confrontation, Yi Shiwen truly never had a clear upper hand. If the fifth god had not retreated, it would inevitably be an enduring battle. Chapter 302, Sword Command Ownership. How did you mess with this guy? After the fifth god left, Yi Shiwen and the others no longer stayed behind and went back to the city. The wolf cub also followed Yi Shiwen and settled in the inn along with him. "Don't talk about that bastard. He tried to tame me and turn me into his pet," the wolf cub said in his usual foul-mouthed language. A proud wolf like him was bound to be angry, after all, even if Yi Shiwen had caught him on the demon island but never treated him like a pet. The wolf cub was treated as a partner by Yi Shiwen, but the fifth god wanted him to surrender. This was simply impossible. When the wolf cub had fought with the fifth god for the first time, he had been at a disadvantage that time, and the struggling battle helped him in setting foot into the half-step legendary realm, but still came close to getting captured by the fifth god. He was seriously injured as well. However, the wolf cub was not the type who wouldn't fight back after suffering a loss. He continued to mess with the army of God on multiple occasions. He even had a fierce battle with an elite expert of half-step legendary realm because the expert wanted to grab him and force him into the ranks of the army of God. As a result, the wolf cub had been chased down for several days by the clan of that young master. That explained a lot about the current situation, but Yi Shiwen was curious to know what happened to Jian Wuchen. "Where is Jian Wuchen?" Yi Shiwen asked, as he had been unable to hear any news about him. "A few days ago, that guy was stranded in a valley and actually found a giant ancient heritage, related to sword arts. So he decided to stay and assimilate it," the wolf cub replied. Yi Shiwen nodded. Obtaining a sword art heritage was indeed a great fortune for a sword master like Jian Wuchen. The Mo siblings heard this and appeared a little envious. Compared to Yi Shiwen, they were more aware of the importance of this kind of fortuitous adventure and heritage. Experts had been known to have grown profoundly powerful after finding such heritage. This road was riddled with elites from various regions, and at their current levels, the siblings' existence was nothing more than an ants in this competitive environment, like an ant that was on the road to TMU, ready to be crushed by any other genius of the younger generation. In a place where geniuses had gathered up like ants, only a few people could climb the ladder and shine above all. Everyone was aware of this brutal truth but was still resolutely embarked on this road, in order to prove their worth. They needed to have an invincible state of mind, while constantly hoping to come across a great adventure on this road, a miracle to make them stronger than others. In reality, something like that was certainly not possible, and only a few lucky ones obtained such an opportunity to witness a fortuitous encounter that could change their destiny. Everyone wanted to be a top player, and any such opportunity was craved by all. This was the fundamental reason why so many experts were unceasingly coming to traverse this road. Like earlier, Hua Menghan obtained an extraordinary heritage on the Demon Island. Yi Shiwen never asked her what it was because it was presumably not an ordinary one. Yi Shiwen remained low-key for several days, also restrained the wolf cub from going out to stir up trouble everywhere. He began closed-door training and indulged in final preparations before the opening of the small world. Anyway, he already had a sword command in his possession, so he was not anxious, just waiting for the right time to make an appearance. But just because Yi Shiwen was relaxing, it did not mean that the entire Yangon city was peaceful as well. On the contrary, in order to compete for the 8 sword commands, the entire city was in chaos. On the second day of Yi Ziwen's closed-door practice, he heard the news that the 5th god had already gotten his hands on 3 sword commands. The members of the army of God were continually searching for sword commands under the leadership of the 5th god. Their overbearing reputation was like a declaration to all, and everyone was aware of their intentions of opening the small world to monopolize the treasure inside. Besides the 3 sword commands in the 5th god's possession, one with Yi Shiwen, the 5th sword command finally made an appearance, and it turned out to be in the possession of Yangon City Lord's hands. The City Lord personally moved into action and snatched the 5th sword command before the 5th god could get his hands on it. After losing the fight, the 5th god had to resentfully give up on it. After all, the army of God, although very strong, was only an organization consisting of young experts, with almost all of them below 50 years of age. There certainly were a lot of talented evildoers in the older generation, and the army of God couldn't risk provoking them. Then the news about the appearance of the 6th sword command soon spread. It soon fell into the hands of a super terrifying influence of the Ming Empire, the largest intelligence agency called Genie Guards. Their strength, as well as influence, was almost unimaginable and making it impossible for other experts to dare and snatch the sword command from them. This time, the operation was led by a super genius from the younger generation of genie guards. He was one of the top young masters of Ming Empire. With the emergence of Genie Young Master, the news about him spread all over the city, inciting several discussions about him and his past. It was found out that Genie Young Master had been specially trained by genie guards since childhood when they found out that he was exceptionally talented. He demonstrated extraordinary talent and had participated in bloody battles to contribute significantly to Genie Guard's glory. He had already defeated countless internal contemporaries and gradually reached the status of the best genius in the younger generation of Genie Guards. Genie Young Master's strength level really raised some eyebrows, not to mention being a native genius of the Ming Empire. Even the government of Yangon City was proud of him. Moreover, Genie Young Master had already gotten permission from the top brass of Genie Guards to participate in the conquest that was ongoing on the ancient route to TMU. Genie Young Master was extremely strong. In the day he joined the conquest, countless experts lost their lives. He became the reason behind the river of blood, spilled from the bodies of elite warriors who tried to stand in his way, including the members of the Army of God. However, no one dared to make irresponsible remarks because they knew about Genie Guard's invincible power as Ming Empire's largest intelligence agency. Messing with an organization of spies and assassins was never going to be good for anyone. The appearance of the 6th Golden Sword Command had already spilled a river of blood, so the whereabouts of the 7th Sword Command made them clamor, causing numerous casualties of strong experts at the hands of a black-robed mysterious expert. Genie Young Master and several other experts engaged in a competition over the 7th Sword Command. However, Genie Young Master played his trump card and directly began a breakthrough from half-step legendary realm to half-step legendary first stage on the site, thereby invoking the heavenly tribulation on site. The other experts were scared of entering the field of heavenly tribulation to snatch the sword command, with several trying and dying in the process. The might of heavenly tribulation was infamous and the deaths of several geniuses scared off the others from trying. At this time, the black-robed mysterious expert strolled through the heavenly tribulation and snatched away the sword command while Genie Young Master was busy having a breakthrough. The unexpected outcome caused uproar among experts. Moreover, the most important question was, who was this black-robed mysterious powerhouse who was so outrageously powerful? A lot of experts were shocked. After all, how could such a strong powerhouse not have a pre-existing fame in the world of martial arts? Stepping into the range of someone else's heavenly tribulation was a very serious and life-threatening stunt, and even true geniuses wouldn't dare to pull off such a stunt. While everyone was still discussing the incident about the 7th Sword Command and the black-robed expert, rumors about the whereabouts of the 8th Sword Command soon spread throughout the city, along with the news of it being in the grasp of a group called Qixing. Chapter 303, Competition for Sword Command. As the information about the location of the 8th Sword Command came to light, the 7 Star Lords organization immediately surfaced and the Sword Command fell into the hands of the Destruction Army, working under this organization. These were tall, burly, and intrepid young males with an ominous presence in this region. Rumors were that whenever they went all out, nobody could stop them. Along with the appearance of Destruction Army, the news about the 7 Star Lords also began to be slowly known. The 7 Star Lords organization was not an ordinary group on this road but a tyrannical organization that was placed on a par with the Army of God and well known to the experts who were traversing this road. It was said that 7 Star Lords organization was composed of 7 top young experts who were tyrannical enough to dominate the entire organization and command the Destruction Army. Suddenly, many people had started talking about the 7 Star Lords. After all, the tyranny of the Destruction Army was the real deal. There were a lot of small and large groups operating on various roads to TMU, and since each group or organization was supposed to have its own territory, this road had always been dominated by the Army of God, whereas the Destruction Army of 7 Star Lords organization was operating on some other road. However, now they arrived on this road to compete for the Sword Command, and this was bound to spark a fierce clash between the two forces. Everyone was waiting to see how the Army of God would react. It didn't take long for the news to reach the 5th God, and he immediately went into action to retrieve the Sword Command from the Destruction Army. Who would have known that the fifth god's declaration of war would have no effect on the destruction army? The fifth god was extremely furious and he directly clashed with the destruction army. However, he gave up later on and retreated. Although no one knew what happened to make him retreat, it was pretty obvious that he had been unable to subdue the destruction army and had to give up in the end. Now that 7 of the 8 sword commands had already appeared and were now in the possession of their respective owners, everyone was eagerly waiting for the appearance of the last one. Most experts didn't know that Yi Shiwen already had a sword command until the army of God openly announced about it being in the possession of Yi Shiwen. Their original intention to do so was to incite experts into attacking Yi Shiwen, but no one knew that even though many people were envious of Yi Shiwen, no one was daring to attack Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen had been staying low-key after his fight with the fifth god, the news about which had already spread throughout the Yangon city and everyone knew about it. Now, it was an established fact that Yi Shiwen was as powerful and fierce as the fifth god, so who would dare to mess with him? Now the news about the eighth sword also spread, everyone started waiting for the small world to open. Sure enough, the fifth god took the position of a leader and summoned the other sword command owners. He also sent invitation tickets to those who wanted to go along with them into the small world. A large group of experts had gathered just outside the Yangon city, near a mountain range that was originally home to the ancient faction before its decline. And as the owner of a sword command, Yi Shiwen naturally received the invitation as well. Even if the army of God didn't want Yi Shiwen to be a part of this ceremony, as long as he was in possession of a sword command, they had no choice but to summon him as well. Yi Shiwen, the Mo siblings and the wolf cub were flying toward the mountain range. There just were too many experts who had gathered to venture into the small world. Besides a majority of experts of the younger generation, there were a lot of tyrannical experts from the older generation in the crowd. Yi Shiwen and his team could certainly be ranked among the top of younger generation, but their overall strength was nothing in comparison when considering some of the experts of the older generation that had gathered there. It was hard to guess the sheer number of experts that were attracted to arrive here, each wanting to have a slice of the treasure. Yi Shiwen was in no hurry and slowly flying toward the mountain. His team was also surrounded by many people who knew his identity, all of them were staying away and not daring to come near Yi Shiwen. They had already heard a lot of insane rumors about him, killing a half-step legendary expert in one shot being one of them, not to mention about his fight with the fifth god. They had not seen him in action, but they could sense his tyrannical presence. At least, the experts of younger generation did not have the courage to challenge Yi Shiwen. Boom! At this time, a terrifying breath spread throughout the sky. A handsome young man in embroidered silk robe and waving a folding fan flew by like a beam of light, followed by 8 guys in similar embroidered robes. Each of them had profound cultivation level, least being half-step legendary realm, with 2 of them being at half-step legendary first stage. Some people recognized this unusual group. It's the young master of genie guards. He is finally here. It really is him. Since that day, the bloody-handed Jin young master's reputation has continued to resound throughout the Ming Empire as the cruel and merciless genius. If he was not cruel and merciless as they say, how else would have emerged victorious from the harsh training of the younger generation of genie guards? I would say, he is among the top players in the younger generation of experts. Gee, it really is the team of Genie Young Master. Just look at them, each and every one of them is in half-step legendary realm and has unfathomable cultivation depth. If Genie Young Master is embarking on this ancient road, does it mean that Genie Guards are planning to turn this road upside down? Now many young experts have stepped onto this road, cropping up many unknown yet invincible masters from all directions as well. Only the time will tell who will be victorious in the end. They were not discussing loudly as they didn't want to get on the wrong of Genie Guards, the largest intelligence agency of Ming Empire. These Genie Guard people seem like rampant individuals. The wolf cub said with disdain. He didn't like rampant people because he couldn't get used to seeing other more rampant than him. Only he had the right to the most rampant and arrogant, no one must surpass him in this department. Compared to the army of God, they have been more low-key. Yi Shiwen said dismissively. As they flew out of the city, they saw hundreds of members of the army of God rushing toward the mountain range. As opposed to the show-off attitude of the army of God, only a handful of genie guards had arrived for the event. The so-called luxury of being low-key in big events. Having fewer experts in a team improves its efficiency. Although the army of God has a lot of members, most of them are useless baggage. Yi Shiwen said lightly, "What's the point of having hundreds of losers when I can easily kill all of them?" One simply couldn't blame Yi Shiwen for thinking this way. This was the kind of world where only the strong had the right to command respect. Yi Shiwen only needed to pay attention to formidable experts like the fifth god, while his subordinates were nothing more than a bunch of losers who were wasting their time, serving others. The Seven-Star Lords organization was also a similar group like the Army of God, but with only 7 members. Yi Shiwen had not seen them but could make a guess that all 7 of them were elites, just like the 5 gods. The Mo siblings were secretly speechless. Yi Zaiwen's statement had left them flabbergasted. After all, only a top player like Yi Shiwen could talk like that. They themselves stood in the same league as the losers Yi Shiwen was looking down on. With respect to him, the ordinary members of the Army of God were simply not worth paying attention to. However, in reality, it was a terrifying organization with each and every one of its members being extraordinary young elites. After Genie Young Master's team, another group of experts appeared in the sky. This group was being led by an old expert who had an unfathomable cultivation depth. Some sharp-eyed people immediately recognized that it was a team of experts who represented the government office of Yangon City. Look, this is the team representing Yangon City's government office. They are called the Protectors of Yangon City and defend the government office. It is said that the previous generation's city lord once rescued the life of this old man, and he has been defending the government office ever since. He has unfathomable strength and has saved Yangon City several times. He has basically become the patron god of Yangon City. Yes, no one knows where he came from, but some people say that he is from TMU while some say that he is from some unknown sect. In short, he is very mystical and nobody really knows his past. Yi Shiwen and the others soon approached the mountain range, and further went toward the large gathering of experts. "Oi, are you Yi Shiwen? Surrender your sword command or it would be difficult for you to escape death." An aggressive voice sounded as a terrifying force swept across. Chapter 304, puts down the evil freaks. An absolutely terrifying force swept over toward Yi Shiwen and engulfed him. His divinities immediately swept out of his body, wrapping the Mo siblings and the wolf cub and pushing them back several dozen feet before coming to a half. At this time, a terrible explosion occurred and blasted a huge crater in the ground. Yi Shiwen looked up and saw a general in magnificent golden armor. His icy cold eyes were staring at Yi Shiwen. His golden scaly armor was glowing breathtakingly in the sunlight. He held an iron spear in his hands. The spear was suffused with anger and fearful resentment, whose extent was simply unimaginable. Who could say how many enemies had been slaughtered by this ominous spear? He was riding an unusual black steed whose hooves were glowing with spooky black flames coming out of them. One could easily tell that this horse was an extraordinary breed of horse-type demon beasts. The sky was obscured by the black flames that soon began to corrode the surrounding space that started to burn and produce sizzling sound. The spectators held their breaths when they realized that the general in golden armor was riding a steed of legendary realm, indicating that he himself must be of higher level. "Yi Shiwen, surrender your sword command or it'd be difficult for you to escape death today," the golden armored general said in a cold voice. The sense of command in his voice was leaving no scope for negotiation. Undoubtedly, he was a powerhouse from the older generation whose cultivation had already reached the peak of legendary first stage. He aspired to fight for the dragon essence in order to enhance his cultivation furthermore. He was one of the several powerhouses of the older generation who obtained news about the appearance of sword commands. And, why not? After all, when City's government office was also involved in this competition, why shouldn't the other powerhouses of the older generation? In this chaotic situation when the top players of the younger generation were going contend with each other for the ultimate treasure, the top players of the older generation were also prepared to make good use of their advantage as experienced experts with as much as 4 times more experience than their younger counterparts. Compared to them, the top players of the younger generation were too tender and inexperienced. At this time, there sounded another loud laughter. It was creepy laughter that came from far away. Yi Shiwen, so long as you hand over the sword command, I, your grandpa Kumo, will guarantee your safety. I will also allow you to enter my practice cave and work as my personal disciple. Keep this in mind that if you accept my offer, you are going to be 1 in a million to enjoy such a privilege. As soon as the voice fell, accompanied by a ghostly wind, a black-robed figure appeared over the horizon. It was a tall, skinny and ugly-looking old man who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere like a ghostly apparition. Kumo ancestor, you dare to snatch the sword command from me? The golden-armored generation angrily stared at the black-robed man. A surge of imposing aura rushed out of his body and went toward the old ancestor. Hump, what's wrong with that, huh? Why cannot I have a sword command? Kumo waved his hand and the imposing aura suddenly disappeared without a trace. It was as if he did not pay any attention to the golden-armored general. Kumo, so you think my army cannot trample flat your cave? The golden-armored general thundered. There was rage in his voice, overflowing with majestic imposing aura. You can try. Kumo replied, I will just turn you into a human puppet. They want the sword command so badly. Yi Shiwen smiled, listen freaks, stop fighting among yourselves. You all can come at me together. What are you two arguing about? Stop this nonsense. I know this little brother is smart and really understands people. He is definitely going to choose this elder sister as the owner of his sword command. At this time, a charming voice sounded from afar. A burst of fragrance invaded the surroundings as a graceful figure came strolling from the distant horizon. She appeared to be in her 20s and had a very beautiful and seductive body. Her face was covered with only a thin while her private parts were moving seductively with her movements. Indeed, she looked very sultry. Several experts saw her and could not help but secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. This woman was just too tempting. As this woman continued to stroll forward, she was leaving behind a trail of pink fragrance. The experts who were in the range immediately found their complexion turn red, along with their wild fantasies being stirred at the same time. Mo was floating behind Yi Shiwen and even his face turned bright red. His reaction was really spectacular and unprecedented. Gee, this woman looks so seductive. She seems to have comprehended a profound seduction technique. No wonder the ordinary experts have no way to resist her charm. Mo said. Among the devils, even the infamous clan of Succubus does not have such a high level of seductiveness. Yi Shiwen was unaffected by this burst of fragrance as was being protected by the cloak of golden divinities that were keeping off any outside interference, whether physical or non-physical in nature. Hu Mainyang, I never expected you get involved in the matters of Wang heavenly faction. Kumo ancestor turned toward the seductive woman and said with a creepy smile. Well, what do you know, my ancestors and Wang heavenly faction seem to have some old connections. So I am planning to get myself a sword command. I am sure this little brother will help his elder sister in fulfilling her goal. Hu Mainyang gave a seductive look to Yi Shiwen and smiled. Standing nearby, many experts secretly gulped their saliva. That woman's seductive aura was making them go wild and compelling them to contemplate romantic mischief. However, no one dared to rush forward. Although this woman was simply irresistible, she had quite a reputation in Yangon City for being an ominous witch who enjoyed brutally torturing and killing young experts. She had her own sadistic methods of killing men and was well known for her depraved evil arts, killing countless in her lifetime. Her hands were completely covered in blood. No one was foolish enough to face such an ominous woman. Yi Shiwen was not at all budged, instead he spoke in a calm voice while carrying a cold smile on his face, you guys have really let me down. I am truly disappointed. I was expecting to be challenged by a powerful figure, but what did I get? You all are just a bunch of freaks that are practically begging to be put down. So, you are not going to surrender the sword command to me? Kumo asked in a dull voice. If you want me to hand it over so badly, why don't you try and make me do it? Yi Shiwen smirked. Boy, you are courting death. The general couldn't control the sudden burst of anger and immediately rode the steed toward Yi Shiwen. His dreadful imposing aura was constantly locking onto Yi Shiwen. Shwa! A loud piercing sound came out of the blue and an iron spear flew toward Yi Shiwen to assassinate him. In the endless ocean of roaring and resentful souls, lingering around the spear, the might of the spear continued to surge as it punctured the vault of heaven and arrived right in front of Yi Shiwen. The spectators held their breaths, their complexions paled as they suddenly realized that a peerless genius like Yi Shiwen had committed the biggest mistake of his life. His strength was on par with the fifth god, but he was still too young to be competing with the older generation. He was barely 20 years old, whereas the golden armored general was 4 times his age, or even more. There was no way Yi Shiwen could compete with him and live. Yi Shiwen moved instantly, like a golden lightning jumping through the clouds, and blasted his palm that instantly transformed into a golden coiling dragon and rushed toward the enemy. Boom! The coiling dragon collided with the iron spear, and this resulted into a massive explosion. Bang! Along with a deafening explosive noise, a strange yet horrifying energy channeled through the spear and leaped toward the golden armored general. Crash bang! As if being punctured in the jaws of death, his golden armor cracked open and blood spattered out from the cracks. Even the divine steed was pushed back several steps by this explosion. Yi Shiwen's power was just extremely terrifying. The golden armored general quickly healed the injury in his hand and looked at Yi Shiwen with an incredible look in his eyes. His army had fought for hundreds of years, and each time they faced a strong opponent, he would fight at the front and wreak havoc on the enemy forces, sweeping everything on the battlefield. He would always rely on his outstanding power and destructive capability to weaken the energy forces. However, today he was made to have a taste of his own medicine by Yi Shiwen. He certainly didn't know that his so-called destructive power was nothing in front of Yi Shiwen's divine power. Yi Shiwen was not in a mood to waste time on this general. He immediately summoned the Han seal in the sky and rushed toward the general. Die! The general roared, and regardless of a huge mountain of energy falling down from the sky, he rushed straight toward Yi Shiwen. His plan was to kill Yi Shiwen before Han seal's impact. He was extremely fast and appeared in front of Yi Shiwen in a flash. Shwa! Yi Shiwen stretched out his hand that was wrapped in divinities. He directly grabbed the spear, and this clash set off a storm of rogue energy in all directions. This is impossible. The general looked incredibly at Yi Shiwen. He couldn't believe his eyes. His spear was unable to pierce Yi Shiwen's hand. In fact, it couldn't even put a scratch on his skin. He thought, just what was the extent of this youngster's toughness? Nothing is impossible in this world, now go to hell. Yi Shiwen sneered, and the Han seal finally smashed down. Boom! With a horrendous noise, both the general and his steed were smashed by the Han seal. Even at the point of death, the general couldn't believe how Yi Shiwen's body could be so formidable. Kumo and Hu Mainyang couldn't believe what they just saw. With their eyes wide open and an incredible look in them, they were staring at Yi Shiwen. They just couldn't understand how a youngster like Yi Shiwen managed to kill a veteran general in such a short period of time. Not to mention, they soon realized that they had messed with the wrong guy. Now it's your turn. Chapter 305, Small World opens. However, Yi Shiwen did not give them the opportunity to renege on their words. Some people refuse to admit their deeds until they are faced with grim reality, not to mention this road was full of trials. The moment these 3 experts underestimated Yi Shiwen and attempted to snatch the sword command from him, it was confirmed that Yi Shiwen would teach them a proper lesson and establish an example in front of everyone. In this world, one could set up one's prestige and reputation by deterring the opposite side. You are next. Yi Xuan pointed at old man Ku Mo and said in an indifferent tone. Both Ku Mo and Hu Mainyang were immediately scared in their heart. The trio had long been rampant in and around the Yangon city. They had quite an illustrious reputation for being ominous experts of the older generation. All three of them were equally powerful, and since one was killed so easily by Yi Xuan, the other two were bound to get frightened. Yi Xuan did not give them enough time to think. He instantly slammed his foot on the ground and rushed forward like a golden general from the myths. He instantly appeared in front of Ku Mo and shot his palm, releasing waves of divine golden qi. It seemed as if a sea of golden energy blotted out the sky and was approaching Ku Mo at an overwhelming speed. Ku Mo finally realized that he messed with the wrong guy, and sometimes, even a century worth of cultivation and experience would turn out to be worthless in saving his life. Hu Mainyang, hurry up and help me out, damn it. If you don't help me quickly, he will certainly go after you after killing me. Ku Mo did not give any thought to his demeanor or grace and shamelessly shouted for help. Hu Mainyang also knew the fact about the interdependence of two neighboring states while facing a much powerful enemy state. She immediately shot her palm, her beautiful hand instantly blossomed like peach flower, seemingly floating in the air but cracking the space in its path. This attack was exceptionally beautiful yet fearsome. Yi Xuan simply ignored this attack and directed a seemingly endless amount of dreadful divine waves toward his target, the old man. Ku Mo panicked and resorted to using his skinny hands to protect himself from the surging golden waves coming at him. Bang! With a loud noise, the surrounding space collapsed in a flash, followed by a heart-wrenching sound of fracturing bones. Ku Mo's hands couldn't block the impact of surging energy waves and were torn apart. The might of Yi Xiwen's gilded tyrant form was extremely formidable. At this time, Hu Mainyang's attack finally crashed into Yi Xiwen's golden body. Clang! There sounded a loud metal clanging sound, as if her attack collided with a golden statue and dissipated. Yi Xiwen's body was exuding a divine aura that simply didn't allow the attack to approach him. His stout yet slim body was entirely unaffected by this. Yi Xiwen's non-stop offensives kept on rushing towards Ku Mo. Yi Xuan suddenly stretched out his hand to send a big hand condensed out of golden energy, towards the old man. Bang! Ku Mo was perplexed by the barrage of attacks and simply didn't have the time or means to respond. There was no way for him to react in time, as he never expected that Yi Xuan would simply ignore Hu Mainyang's attacks and focus entirely on him. He was instantly grabbed by the big hand and crushed, turning his body into a ball of blood fog. Hu Mainyang exclaimed as she saw the second member of the infamous trio being killed mercilessly by Yi Xuan. Immediately after it happened, Yi Xuan instantly shot again. In a single step, he arrived in front of her like a flash of lightning. Hu Mainyang's face, at this moment, no longer had that same seductive look. Instead it was full of fear and disbelief. Yi Xuan had taken a ruthless approach toward the trio from the beginning, and she was certainly not going to be an exception. Her fear was understandable. After all, Yi Xuan had killed two veterans of older generation in a blink of an eye. Boom! Yi Xuan shot his palm towards her. She quickly responded by attempting to block the attack, but how could she be his opponent? Bang! With a dull thumping sound, the space around them collapsed suddenly from the impact of his palm attack. Hu Mainyang was sent flying. She suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood in mid-flight. Her white skin turned bright red, making people think that this was really cruel to be done to her. However, Yi Xiwen's facial expression didn't change. With the usual cold look on his face, he summoned the Han seal in the sky and smashed it down. Boom! Han seal dropped upon Hu Mainyang and smashed her death, leaving nothing but an awful patch of blood and meat behind. A lot of experts held their breaths as they saw this terrible scene. Yi Xuan was really a ruthless and heartless guy. How could he be so cruel to a beautiful woman like her? They didn't know that Yi Xuan didn't differentiate between genders whenever it came to dealing with his enemies. So long as there was an enemy in front of him, he wouldn't consider their gender or status before killing them. It's over. Come on, let's go. Yi Xuan said dismissively to his team. At this time, a figure appeared in the sky and flew by at an incredible speed. This figure was full of killing intention, clad in magnificent clothing and appeared as cold as ice. It was recognized that this person was actually one of the 7-star lords of the Destruction Army. At this time, the warriors of Destruction Army had their bodies covered in blood, indicating that they just arrived from a bloody battle, apparently ambushed just like Yi Shiwen for the sword command. Several experts looked at Yi Ziwen's flawless state, then they turned around to look at the miserable state of Destruction Army and suddenly gasped. How could a youngster like him be so strong? Even 3 of the well-known powerhouses of the older generation were not his matches, and were slaughtered mercilessly within moments. They had the advantage of having a century worth of experience, perhaps even more. But a rare genius like Yi Shiwen appeared out of nowhere and smashed them like ants. Yi Shiwen crossed hands behind his back and went all the way to the mountains. Soon, he arrived near a stretch of flat land on the mountainside which was apparently plagued by strong sandstorms. The strong winds blew occasionally to reveal a large square. It most likely was the residence of the Lost Wang Heavenly Faction. Once a prosperous and extremely large sect was now ruined to such an extent. In the inner parts of the square, the crowd of Army of God was gathered around the 5th god who was proudly watching everyone. He was really like an authentic deity general. In front of the Army of God, several corpses were lined up on the ground. It would raise people's palpitation if they found out that these were all experts of the legendary realm, but they fell into the hands of the Army of God and lost their lives. The 5th god also killed several experts for military glory. Standing on the left of the Army of God was the group of Yangon city government, headed by the city's patron saint. There were several corpses lined up in front of them as well, but not as many as the ones laid in front of the Army of God. This was because of the fact that Yangon City's patron saint was a reputed expert and no one dared to mess with him. Even among the experts of the older generation fighter, it was a well-known fact to stay away from him. The black-robed expert was standing next to the crowd of Yangon City government. His black robe was covered with stains of blood all over. He must have experienced a bloody battle before arriving here. Obviously, at this time, everyone's gaze fell upon the new visitor, Yi Shiwen. He could feel their gazes probing him from all directions, but he just didn't care and took a position. Yi Shiwen felt like he had a familiar feeling, but it was only part of his fleeting thoughts. Then he looked to the other side, on the right-hand side of the Army of God, and saw Genie Young Master. He was clad in a fine brocaded uniform of genie guards. Just like the crow of Yangon city government, even their front was clean thanks to their ominous reputation as the largest organization of spies and assassins in the Ming Empire, hence no one dared to mess with them on the way. The forces of Destruction Army were stationed beside Genie Young Master's team in blood-stained clothes. Besides the current owners of the 8 sword commands, several other experts were also present on the scene and were excitedly discussing about the sword command owners. Of course, a lot of them were at half-step legendary realm, but no one dared to mess with them in any way because these sword command owners had slaughtered their way to this spot after facing several hurdles, not to mention they also had the backing of big influences. They must not be provoked at any cost, because those who already did were the most unfortunate ones. Since all are here, let's get started, said the 5th god and looked coldly at Yi Shiwen, as if looking at a dead man. Rumble. Along with an ear-shattering bellow that resounded everywhere, a huge portal appeared out of thin air with 8 giant keyholes, having the appearance of scabbards. This portal had a very conspicuous appearance and it released a surge of desolate breath into the sky that immediately had a repression effect on everyone. The door leading to the relics of Wang Heavenly Faction is going to open now. Be prepared, everybody. At this time, the leader of Yangon city government with unfathomable breath shouted. Suddenly, a streamer of light flew toward the portal. A sword command automatically inserted itself into one of the keyholes, and suddenly, as if after having received some kind of stimulus, the huge portal started rumbling and trembling. Immediately, the other sword command owners also allowed their sword commands to depart towards the keyholes, including the black-robed expert. Even Yi Shiwen was no exception. When the last key went inside the keyhole, a door appeared in the portal and it started to open slowly. There was nothing but misty whiteness on the other side of the door. "Let's go!" Yi Shuwen shouted and was the first in his team to rush out, followed by the wolf cub and the Mo siblings. A total of 4 figures blazed out like beams of light and crossed the portal. The black-robed expert also rushed into the portal and instantly vanished without a trace. When Yi Zaiwen's team crossed to the other side of the portal, they suddenly felt like everything around them was gone, leaving behind only chaos to welcome them. After stepping into chaos, Yi Shuwen could certainly feel the space around him twisting, turning, and breaking apart. If not for the aura of protection originating from the sword command, Yi Shuwen estimated that they would all be directly torn to pieces in this chaos. Yi Shuwen knew that they were supposed to pass through numerous layers of different space before reaching the Wang Heavenly Faction's small world. Although the entrance to this small space was located near the Yangon city, its real location was not known to anyone. In fact, no one was told about the specific location of a martial arts station, besides a handful of high-level officials, or else if the location was found then the hostile forces would be able to directly tear the space to infiltrate. And that would definitely be a huge disaster for a martial arts station. Yi Yuan School also had a small world and its entrance was hidden in the depths of Yi Yuan School's mountain forest. The real secrets of Yi Yuan School were stored up safely in that small world and its true location was not revealed to anyone. Only a handful of elders would stand guard perennially to protect the small world. And one must pass through all those guarding elders to enter the small world, not to mention there were tokens similar to the sword commands to go inside. Hence, if there was a strong enemy invasion and Yi Yuan School was completely destroyed, this small world would act as the perfect hiding place to block out all the enemies because even if the enemy managed to find the entrance to the small world and shattered the portal, they wouldn't be able to reach the small world without the guidance from the tokens. Not to mention, it was a near impossible task to find this small world in the midst of chaotic space turbulence. Chapter 306, Wolf Cub Under Heavenly Tribulation. Perhaps, even the founder of Yi Yuan School did not know the real location of its secret small space inside the chaotic space. In other words, it would be a near impossible task for the enemy to randomly tear up space to pinpoint the location of Yi Yuan School's secret space. This was a way to safeguard the existence of a martial arts sect, like the final lifeline. Space was constantly distorting, fragmenting, and breaking apart. It was as if the universe itself was disillusioned, with space debris floating around everywhere. It was a spectacular scene, a gorgeous one but extremely dangerous at the same time. Although Yi Shuwen had confidence in his gilded tyrant body, he was still cautious because there was a possibility that bumping into those fragments of space debris might cut his golden body. If he was in Sage Realm then only he would truly have a certain ability to withstand space debris. Boom! The distortion in space vanished all of a sudden and they were greeted with bright scenery. Yes, they had entered the secret ruins of the Wang Heavenly Faction. Even the desolation of this place was pleasant to the eye. All one could see was a desolate scene of endless mountains everywhere. No one could say for sure but this place had been neglected for thousands of years. Usually, a small space like this one would be governed, maintained periodically and would have active spiritual arteries to maintain a continuous production of Lingqi, giving vitality to this world. However, this space was left abandoned for too long, even the spiritual arteries had started drying up. Vast stretch of barren land indicated a mass-scale death of vegetation, the space deterioration had also begun. If left untouched, this space would completely collapse in coming millenniums. As soon as the dragon veins would die, this space would have almost nothing to hold on to. One cold sea ruins of some ancient structures, disclosing a bit about this place's history and vicissitudes. Roar! A loud beastly roar came from a distant place, followed by a series of beast roars coming from all directions. These roars belonged to the demon beasts that were originally sent to this small space as captives, to act as preys for the disciples of Wang Heavenly Faction. However, the disciples were long gone and the demon beast had flourished over time, spreading throughout this entire small space. Roar! 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 The roaring sound was getting louder and louder as if the source of the roar was getting closer. Suddenly, a giant red griffin, with its whole body covered in flames, appeared out of nowhere and attacked. Yi Shiwen was at the front. Initially, he couldn't tell what kind of bird it was until he saw its real form in the flames. It had a mouthful of sharp teeth and it opened its huge mouth to bite Yi Shiwen. Bang! As soon as the griffin arrived right in front of Yi Shiwen, he slapped it directly on the face and it immediately died a tragic death. The demon beasts in this small world are surprisingly so powerful. Yi Shiwen said that although he had slapped a griffin to death, it was definitely a demon beast of complete truth realm. Yi Shiwen soon discovered a large flock of griffins, each having the strength equivalent of truth's 7th or 8th stage, flying towards his team. There were a few half-step legendary level demon beasts in that flock as well. Boom! A large section of fluctuating sword ki emerged from Yi Shiwen's hand and went straight into the sky. It seemed as if the sky itself was pierced by a sword as the sword ki further went forward and crashed into the flock of griffins. Slash! With a loud piercing sound, the sword ki delimited a wide path through that huge flock of griffins in a split second, butchering numerous griffins almost instantly. However, there still were an overwhelming number of griffins rushing towards Yi Shiwen and his team. Yi Shiwen had a serious look on his face as he said, "Be prepared." As soon as his voice fell, the flock of griffins overran them. The wolf cub had a cultivation of half-step legendary realm and thus had the capability to deal with this situation, but the Mo siblings were in distress. They were in complete truth realm and being surrounded by a large number of griffins that were at truth's 7th or 8th stage was truly disadvantageous for them. Not to mention, they didn't stand a chance against the griffins of complete truth realm and half-step legendary realm. But the good news was that Yi Shiwen had already taken care of this problem by pinpointing and killing the formidable griffins first. The remaining ones were not powerful enough to be a threat to the lives of the Mo siblings. They all knew that this would be a rare opportunity to gain experience because Yi Shiwen was on their side, watching over them. He wouldn't let them have any problems. In the following half-a-month period, Yi Shiwen continued on a killing spree. God knows how many demon beasts were slaughtered during that time. Several ethnic groups of demon beasts had cropped up in this small world and the lack of human presence had contributed to a vast explosion in their population. Yi Shiwen just wanted to kill these demon beasts left and right because there were just too many of them available on the platter. Ordinary people couldn't imagine how Yi Shiwen and his team continued the killing spree for several days non-stop without a moment of rest. As they were venturing deeper into the depths, the demon beasts were getting stronger and fiercer. After reaching a certain point, they only found the demon beasts of complete truth realm. Such type of rigorous practice with back-to-back battles was the most effective way to level up. The Mo siblings finally stepped into half-step legendary realm, and after having passed through numerous battles, their inner states completely stabilized. Heavenly Wolf Howling Moon. The wolf cub howled and summoned a magnificent diagram that instantly killed a demon beast that appeared on verge of stepping into the legendary realm. The wolf cub, then, devoured the demon core of that demon beast, and almost immediately, he was surrounded by intermittent waves of terrifying breath. His hair inverted as he stood still while surrounded by his own aura raging wantonly. He plans to challenge the heavenly tribulation. Yi Mo shouted. His breath began to boil up, rolling away in all directions. In the sky, layer after layer of dark clouds started to build up. This was a spectacular scene of the instantaneous formation of heavenly tribulation. It appeared like the wolf cub was planning to have a breakthrough from half-step legendary realm to half-step legendary fist stage. This heavenly tribulation was the great test that must be cleared at all costs. Not to mention, there was no option of backing out. Yi Shiwen hastily said, "Hurry up and get away from us." Yi Shiwen didn't want to receive accidental injuries while messing with a heavenly tribulation, especially with the one that was going to test a freak like wolf cub. Although this heavenly tribulation had not manifested completely, Yi Shiwen could still sense its terrifying coercion. Moreover, this time the wolf cub was already at half-step legendary realm, so the heavenly tribulation would be calibrated accordingly to test him. Yishuan couldn't imagine the extent of its destructive power, but it was enough to make his scalp tingle a bit. The wolf cub quickly went far away, and at this moment, a rain of raging lightning strikes began to aim at him. His black furry body was immediately struck by thunderbolts one after another. Soon, the air was filled with burning smell. The wolf cub started hopping around to dodge the rain, the thunderbolts. Yishuan and the Mo siblings were standing afar and observing this magnificent spectacle. They were not planning to help the wolf cub. At this time, several tyrannical soul searches swept out of nowhere. They turned out to be coming from the older generation experts of the legendary realm. They must have sensed the heavenly tribulation and sent their soul searches. It seemed like they were aiming to attack Yishuan and his team while they were at their weakest, since one of the team members was undergoing breakthrough. Yishuan sent his soul search to intercept the incoming ones. Who'd be so courageous to challenge him? Had they not seen him kill 3 powerhouses of older generation within moments? It seemed like some people were still coveting to take down Yishuan. After all, he was one of the top players of the younger generation and was operating on his own, without the backing of any major influence. If they managed to kill him, then they might seize various treasures that he must have accumulated during his adventures. The very thought of seizing those treasure from the corpse of Yishuan must be exciting them to no extent. Among those who were considered the top players of the younger generation, several members of the Army of God, the Genie Young Master, the 7-star lords etc. were considered untouchable because of their strong backings. The expert in black robe was the first to go in but was nowhere to be seen. There was no news about him in the past few days, as if he didn't exist in general. Similarly, the Destruction Army was backed by the 7-star lords and hence must not be provoked. In the end, the older experts must have decided that their best and easiest option was to target a lone powerhouse like Yishuan. It seems like I haven't killed enough to prove my point, Yishuan said with a sigh. Ha ha ha, kill them all, kill as many as you can, Mo said while laughing like a madman. After all, those killed by Yishuan would transform into blood fog and their flesh and blood would be absorbed by Tianyuan Mirror. The more he would kill, the faster would be the restoration of Tianyuan Mirror. You wait here. I will go get rid of some annoying flies, Yishuan said. Mo siblings nodded. Even they had sensed arrogance in those soul searches. Yishuan, carrying a long blade, instantly turned into a golden beam of light and sped towards the distant place, precisely toward the hideout of those masters. Dash. Chapter 307, Half-Step Legendary Realms. First stage. Yishuan was treading on a rainbow, marching across the void while raising the long blade in his hands. In a blink of an eye, he arrived in front of a warrior. Yishuan, what do you think you are doing? That warrior saw Yishuan suddenly appearing in front of his face and a trace of fear abruptly appeared on his face. After all, they were already discussing about joining forces to take down Yishuan. This proved the point that Yishuan was a terrifying existence and they were really not sure if they could deal with him on their own. Hence, they planned to join forces against him. Otherwise, who would be willing to share Yishuan's treasures with others? You are overreaching yourselves, Yishuan sneered, thinking that these people really wanted to gang up on him. Shwa! The long blade in Yishuan's hands suddenly exploded and released terrifying rays of light. Without enough time to respond, a touch of bloodstain appeared on that warrior's nape, and almost at the same time, his body went sluggish all of a sudden, which was visible to the naked eye. His blood and essence condensed into a stream of scarlet blood and merged with Yishuan's body, further getting absorbed by the Tianyuan Mirror the very next instant. After having absorbed the fine essence and blood of a legendary expert, the Tianyuan Mirror burst into waves of carnage immediately. The outline of Yishuan's figure resembled that of a blood god that seemed to have arrived from the ancient times to slaughter all. Pitiful screams came from the distance as the experts of Legendary Realm were getting killed by Yishuan one by one. The Mo siblings were speechless and looking at each other with empty expressions on their faces. They couldn't help but realize that Yishuan was really a sinister person and fairly decisive in performing such tasks. He truly was a big shot with great persona. Being a big shot wasn't something that commanded one to not act personally, rather it made sure that one would certainly not let off an enemy no matter what. In a life and death situation, rage and decisive killing was a must. It wasn't like the Mo brother and sister were soft-hearted people. Since the day they set foot on this road, the gathering of a variety of talented geniuses had made their existence comparable to that of an ant's, not to mention they were also hunted down at multiple occasions. They also gazed at the heavenly tribulation that had encircled the wolf cub and suddenly felt like even those around Yishuan were not normal. The wolf cub's heavenly tribulation was getting increasingly terrifying with passing time. If it was them surrounded by that kind of heavenly tribulation, they would have long been hacked to death. But this wolf cub, although shrieking and howling wildly, was constantly jumping around and bravely facing the vicious attacks. There was no sign of injuries on his body, nor was there any significant damage done to his vitality and basic strength. At this time, the wolf cub was struck by a thunderbolt and it seemed like he was dead. The whole heavenly tribulation suddenly started raging and began to boil with excitement. A section of lightning crossed down from the sky and started condensing into wolves one after another. All of those lightning figures appeared like wolves of half-step legendary realm with their wolf king standing at the back. Not to mention, the wolf king was at the peak of half-step legendary realm's first stage. Several ice-cold eyes were staring intently at the wolf cub. In a chorus of loud howls, hundreds of lightning wolves sprang toward the wolf cub at once. These wolves were all at the same level as the wolf cub and were unusually horrifying. Mo's siblings were immediately amazed by this scene. Everyone knows the fact that incredible experts have to go through much more terrifying heavenly tribulation during breakthrough. Since this tribulation was getting even more terrifying, it was quite easy to figure out that it was abnormal. Even a demon beast powerhouse would fail to survive this level of heavenly tribulation. Therefore, one could say that this ordinary-looking wolf cub definitely had an extraordinary origin, and perhaps was of noble descent. The wolf cub roared and rushed forward, crashing into the pack of lightning wolves and tangling together. Initially, it seemed like an easy task for the wolf cub, but at this time, it might actually turn into an exceptional bloody battle. A lightning wolf bit the wolf cub and directly ripped off a piece of flesh from his body. He was immediately in pain and yelled out loud. He instantly turned around and swallowed that lightning wolf in one go. Huge amount of lightning energy contained in that lightning wolf's body was instantly absorbed by the wolf cub into his body, immediately raising his spiritual value a little. It was hard to tell for how long this battle continued, but finally, those lightning wolves were wiped out by the wolf cub. However, the real trouble had only just arrived as the most powerful lightning wolf, the Wolf King, suddenly flew toward the wolf cub while howling loudly and then nipped at him. After absorbing a lot of lightning wolves, the wolf cub's stature now exceeded more than 2 meters, equally matched with that lightning wolf king. The two great wolves started attacking each other in the sky. This was truly a tragic battle. The wolf cub was bleeding heavily with no way to stop the blood loss. Large chunks of his flesh were torn apart, with bits of flesh and blood falling down from the sky. The frigid praying that happened just now made the world change its color. The Mo sibling had their complexions changed as a result of witnessing this battle firsthand. It was such a tragic heavenly tribulation that they would definitely have failed to pass, but the wolf cub was still fighting. Then, abruptly, a flash of rainbow-colored light dazzled the sky. Yi Shiwen, carrying a long blade in his hand, was treading the rainbow. His body was covered with stains of blood all over and brimming with murderous aura. In a split second, he killed a lot of legendary experts. Yi Shiwen said nothing but looked at the wolf cub from afar. He could tell that the wolf cub's fight was in its last act. The muscles on his chest were gnawed off while the lightning wolf king had half of its head bitten off. A normal demon beast would have died as a result of that, but it was made up of pure energy and all it needed was to restore itself to its original form. Yi Shiwen was relieved when at last, the wolf cub discharged a divine beam directly toward the lightning wolf king and hacked it into pieces before ultimately absorbing its entire energy the very next instant. The wolf cub successfully crossed the entirety of heavenly tribulation and his body suddenly started falling down from the sky. Yi Shiwen and the Mo sibling quickly rushed toward him to check on his condition. "Gee, I did not expect you to actually have such a tribulation," Yi Shiwen said with admiration and amazement. "You should try as well." The wolf cub cast a weak gaze at Yi Shiwen, as if having no strength left to lift his eyelids. But at this time, everyone noticed that the clouds of heavenly tribulation did not disperse, on the contrary, they grew denser and denser. "Crap. Just now, I spent all my strength to cross the heavenly tribulation. What is going on?" The wolf cub suddenly cursed out loud. "This is mine," Yi Shiwen said as he looked up and gazed at the raging cloud. He could feel the heavenly tribulation firmly locking on at him, making it impossible for him to escape. He could tell that if he tried to leave that spot, the heavenly tribulation would shoot him down. Mo siblings quickly took the wolf cub got away from Yi Shiwen. When the wolf cub's heavenly tribulation was that terrifying, then Yi Ziwen's was definitely going to be unimaginably insane. Your killing intention had affected the heavenly tribulation, and that is why it had not yet dispersed, rather it is coming down together with your heavenly tribulation, Yi Mo said. The heavenly tribulation didn't target the experts randomly. It usually targeted those with exceptional murderous aura or those who offended the heavens and then tried to reason, but today, this didn't happen because of Yi Ziwen's murderous aura. First, the wolf cub's heavenly tribulation had not left, and secondly, the cultivation of Yi Shiwen was at such an advanced level that the heavenly tribulation was going to appear for him sooner or later. In the sky, the clouds were darkening and getting denser and denser with electric snakes shuttling back and forth inside those clouds. Voila! Along with a shrill noise, hundreds of electric snakes swooped down from the clouds, outdoing one another while falling towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen was entirely still but continuously improving his martial skill. His gilded tyrant form was going berserk and exuding rays of golden light in all directions, giving rise to the golden swords that were slashing the electric snakes. Boom! 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 Intermittent and fierce explosions occurred right above Yi Shiwen. Violent storm waves formed by the explosions mingled with the electrical sparks and swept everywhere, engulfing anything in the path and wreaking havoc. After the divinities on Yi Ziwen's body transformed into golden swords and were cutting through the raid of electrical energy. Yi Ziwen's gilded body was absorbing that energy constantly and evolving. Such a heavenly tribulation was a nightmare for an ordinary genius of legendary realm, but it was nothing for Yi Shiwen. His gilded tyrant form rushed to the fourth layer and the durability of his body reached unimaginable proportions. Crash bang! At that moment, bolts of lightning crashed from the clouds like the torrential downpour, all the way toward and upon Yi Shiwen. Bang! 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 The heavenly lightning was getting more and more intense. Its power was also growing gradually, getting stronger and stronger, enough to drown Yi Shiwen in a sea of lightning. The Mo brother and sister were stunned by seeing such a crazy tribulation, and that too much more aggressive than that of the wolf cub, almost to the point of exaggeration. Really, just what kind of pet was this wolf cub? And what kind of owner was Yi Shiwen? Such an inconceivable pair was truly mind-boggling. The heavenly tribulation continued to test Yi Shiwen and could do nothing to him. Gradually, the lightning strikes also stopped, but Yi Shiwen was not yet relaxed because he knew that the heavenly tribulation was still not gone. Sure enough, and as expected, a lightning bolt transformed into a long spear and struck down with a loud rumbling sound. Yi Shiwen immediately raised his hand to block while shooting his other palm toward the incoming lightning spear. Boom! With an extremely dreadful explosion, the lightning spear set off a lightning storm and started to wreak havoc. Yi Ziwen's hand was now covered in blood, which happened as a result of the lightning storm set off by the lightning spear. The impact shook his body completely and almost cracked his bones. Yi Shiwen was suddenly vigilant, as this was the first time he was injured while crossing a heavenly tribulation. He immediately activated the Phoenix regeneration and healed the wound on his hand. However, the heavenly tribulation clouds were still roaring in the sky and 3 lightning spears appeared at once. Boom. 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 Yishuan was rocking his golden divine clothes as he bravely received those 3 lightning spears on his body, which tore open his flesh but was soon repaired by phoenix regeneration in a flash. These lightning spears were really nasty as they were so fast that there was no way to dodge them. Yishuan would take them on each time and his body would be covered in blood as a result, but he continued to absorb these lightning spears into his body, and slowly, his wounds grew smaller in size and fewer in number. Eventually, those lightning spears no longer posed any threat to his gilded tyrant form as it had become much more formidable than earlier after nourishment. Finally, it seemed like the heavenly tribulation didn't have the means to continue any longer and resigned in the end, of course, quite unwillingly. As soon as it ended, Yi Zaiwen's body suddenly began to emit waves of intermittent golden light. After having passed through the baptism of this heavenly tribulation, his tyrant body technique had reveled great benefits in the form of the enormous progress that came as the byproduct of all this. Yi Zaiwen's breath also began to have an unceasing breakthrough, bit by bit approaching the first stage of half-step legendary realm. The so-called half-step legendary realm's first stage required an absolute accumulation of energy prior to the breakthrough, which was naturally extremely difficult to achieve. Boom! A burst of energy swept out of Yi Zaiwen's body all at once. And finally, he stepped into half-step legendary realm's first stage. Chapter 308, Dragon Essence appears. The time was crawling away slowly until half a month had already passed. At the end of it, Yishuan completely consolidated the inner state of his cultivation while wantonly slaughtering demon beasts that happened to appear in his path and absorbed the essence from the demon cores, etc. Ultimately, his cultivation fully consolidated at the peak of half-step legendary realm's first stage. With all sorts of secret technique in his arsenal, he was confident enough to sweep away any and all experts of half-step legendary realm's second stage quite effortlessly. In fact, he was confident that he might even be able to contend with the weaker experts of half-step legendary realm's third stage. Excluding a dab hand like Yishuan, even the wolf cub was at half-step legendary realm's first stage and could easily contend with experts of half-step legendary realm's second stage. In addition to that, the MO siblings also benefited a lot in the past half-a-month period, experiencing an enormous promotion in their strengths and also obtained the remains of various heavenly treasures, etc. Before long, they were also able to reach the first stage of half-step legendary realm. Such a tyrannical team would be considered extremely powerful in the entire domain of Wang heavenly faction. In short, this team was so formidable that one could not find an opponent for them in the vicinity, neither did anyone try to mess with them or appear anywhere nearby. Soon, the name and fame of Yishuan and the others rushed out and spread throughout the ruins of Wang heavenly faction. Yishuan rushed all the way toward the central regions of this small world because he didn't his team to advance too far away from their destination. After all, if their team happened to encounter a group of powerful demon beasts, there was no way they would be able to escape that easily. The best course of action was to maintain unceasing slaughtering and keep moving forward all the way toward the destination. Boom! Yishuan shot his fist and blasted away a group of uncanny and grotesque-looking demon beasts of some unknown species. This is totally unreasonable. These spiritual arteries have almost dried up. What on earth are these demon beasts relying on for a living? The wolf cub said in his usual foul-mouthed manner. Although they were decisively and mercilessly killing their way toward the destination and continued on the killing spree for half a month, enough to make anyone throw up out of disgust, but they weren't homicidal enough to not realize the condition those beasts were in. Seems like a desperate attempt by these high-level spiritual arteries to show filial piety to the living beings of this world, perhaps this world's last resort to return the favor to its residents. Yishuan said, similar to how some people experience a dying flash when they miraculously gain heightened consciousness right before dying, this world's spiritual arteries are acting up frantically at the end of its lifespan, trying to return the favor while simultaneously speeding up the demise of this world in the process. Yishuan had already asked about all this from Yimo, an old monster that had lived for God knows how many years, following the Demon King for all those years, and of course, he had seen it all. The very extent of his wisdom was non-quantifiable, not to mention there were only a few real secrets that didn't come under his domain of knowledge. Now, they were entering the observation region of the ruins of Wang Heavenly Faction and finally experienced the true madness of the ruins. At this stage, the spiritual arteries started acting crazily, spewing Ling Qi everywhere and thereby causing a sudden increase in the numbers of demon beast. The more they ventured into the depths, the more warriors they encountered en route, all rushing in one direction. The reason was very simple: there were reports of discovering a valley where the dragon essence was supposedly laid out. The news immediately caused numerous experts go crazy. Didn't they come to this small world for the dragon essence? Everyone had come here for the dragon essence. After a long time, they finally got the accurate news, and it contained something peculiar that was bound to make people excited. There were reports about an approximately 50 to 60 meters tall black Jiaolong. It was not an adult yet, but already very terrifying with its black scale glowing breathtakingly and making it look like a mountain in general. Its mustaches were constantly moving up and down quite vigorously. Suffused with horrifying breath, dreadful enough to make a human tremble in fear, its whole body was shrouded in fog that was being churned by electrical sparks. Right beneath that flood dragon was the corpse of a long dragon. The experts were looking intently at this strange scene and suddenly understood that the dragon essence actually took birth after the death of a dragon. They were quite surprised to see the dragon essence that appeared just like a real dragon, but it was covered with a mat of dragon corpse. However, unlike an ordinary corpse, it contained an aggressive vigor. Dragons were considered praiseworthy creatures throughout the world and inherently carried a very scary coercion, known as Long Wei. No wonder it remained in the corpse even after death. More and more experts rushed to this spot. Genie Young Master, the fifth god and the other powerhouses had already arrived, but this time, they did not have the thoughts of infighting. Everyone's focus was centered on this incomparably huge flood dragon. They were aware of the fact that this flood dragon must be killed first, otherwise, it would be impossible to encroach on the dragon essence lying beneath it. This flood dragon should have been born not many months ago. He is still in infancy. Yi Mo said, normally, a flood dragon is born in the legendary realm, grows in the sage realm, and by the time it's fully grown up, it will have at least reached the great sage level, and this is absolute for all flood dragons. This flood dragon has already reached the peak of legendary 3rd stage and should be having a breakthrough to legendary 4th stage any time now. The more powerful is a demon beast, the more difficult it finds growing up, especially for an inborn demon beast like this one. Yi Mo further explained, usually, a flood dragon's childhood stretches for hundreds of years. However, this young dragon was born not long ago and was still able to break through to such an extent. I think this is somehow related to the absorption of dragon essence. Yi Xuan and the Mo siblings were dumbstruck when they heard the explanation. A real flood dragon would absolutely reach the great sage level once it was all grown up. This was simply unheard of. Just how terrifying was the dragon race? But while this flood dragon was just an infant, it already had all it would take to deter even the most formidable human experts present on the scene. Even Yi Xuan might not be able to deal with this dragon, but the experts did not want to give up this opportunity. They finally managed to find the dragon essence. How could they just let it go? They could tell that this floor dragon was about to step into legendary 4th stage, and if that happened, no one would be able to face it. As long as it was sitting on top of the dragon essence, its rate of progress was definitely going to be faster. They certainly knew about the dragon essence enough to have figured out this problem. By that time, they would have no chance to snatch the dragon essence away from the flood dragon. Even now, it was very difficult, but if they let it be like that for any longer, then it would become impossible later on. Moreover, they already noticed that the flood dragon was enraged after being encircled by human experts. Although the flood dragon was unable to speak, its tyrannical soul perception swept over and properly relayed its anger to everyone. Moreover, allowing this flood dragon to grow any stronger wasn't going to be beneficial to them in any way. It seems like not much time has passed since the hatching of this flood dragon's egg. I do not know from where Wang Heavenly Faction found a dragon egg. Since the world has changed, even a hybrid dragon is hard to find, let alone a legitimate true-blood dragon. Yemo said, my estimate is that this flood dragon's egg must have stayed on the dragon essence for a long time before hatching, probably after the completely decline of Wang heavenly faction. Humans, damn it. The angry young flood dragon roared and its several hundred feet long body soared high in the sky instantly like a mountain and flew towards human experts nearby. The noise from terrifying explosions broke out immediately and submerged the space itself. The flood dragon's impact was in direction of the army of God. They were the first group to arrive and had initiated the attack once but did not succeed. But now, the flood dragon was vengeful and immediately rushed toward the crowd of the army of God. Although it hadn't been long since the flood dragon hatched out of its egg, its body was huge. It gave out a long and loud cry and releases a type of fluctuating coercion in all directions that swept out, chipping the space just like mighty ocean waves. Bang! 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 Those members of the army of God that were above half-step legendary realm managed to save their lives, but those below that had their bodies fragmented into pieces by the shock waves. Humph! The fifth god rushed forward with his long halberd like a god from ancient times. The long halberd directly punctured into the body of the flood dragon. Boom! Ripples of horrifying energy waves were set off everywhere, crazily disintegrating anything in the path. The fifth god immediately repositioned himself and directly stabbed the black flood dragon between the eyebrows with his halberd, setting off a storm of rogue energy waves. A scale that was about half a meter in size was instantly chipped off, but the flood dragon immediately used its tyrannical power to send out shock waves, shaking off the halberd in the process. Poof! The fifth god spouted a mouthful of blood and was sent flying dozens of meters away. At that very instant, the flood dragon faced forward and immediately rushed to grab the fifth god's flying body in midair. Several experts were watching this from the sidelines and immediately held their breaths as they realized that this young flood dragon was extremely scary. They couldn't help but engage themselves in introspection, thinking whether they could really face such a creature. Many reached the conclusion that it was meaningless to even think about facing this flood dragon as they feared losing their lives by the shockwaves itself. Facing it head-on was simply out of the question. Listen everyone, no matter how we do it, we must kill this beast. At this time, the patron saint of Yangon City spoke. I hope we are able to work together this time, otherwise, no one will be able to reap benefits, but there's a possibility of hope if we manage to slay this beast. The experts nodded in agreement, all at once. Yes, he is right. We must slay this young flood dragon no matter what. Indeed, it must be slain at any cost. Many people confessed that they couldn't obtain the dragon essence anymore as they were coveting the young flood dragon in their hearts. Regardless of its age, it was still a dragon with the blood of a real dragon lord flowing in its veins. It was said that in this world, only the race of gods could contend with this so-called race of terror, the dragon race. So I guess he reaches legendary realm and can finally start kicking some ass, right? Actually, he's stabilizing his cultivation in the 9th level. Maybe after finishing the rest of the library. He's afraid that he can't handle the half-step legendary book demons. The MC conveniently turned chicken shit at just the right moment, huh? Considering he's strong against demons, and have been dismembered on multiple occasions for the sake of leveling. You're probably right. So when will he reach legendary realm? He will probably need to reach peak 9th level first. Right. Then there's this true complete thing. Huh. Then this half-step legendary thing that the writer will probably retcon into a realm. So, when will he reach the goddamned legendary realm? There are more than 3,000 chapters left, you know. Chapter 309, Flood Dragon slaughtered. If they could obtain even a small part of its body, then to them, it would be like the supreme and most precious treasure. Yi Shiwen, come on, kill this baby flood dragon and make it a blood sacrifice for your poisonous dragon water control flag array. Doing that will upgrade its power by multiple levels and might help in fully achieving the legendary level. Yemo said excitedly as the flag array took deepwater black serpents as sacrifices in order to establish the foundation of its enhancement, and both the dragons and snakes belonged to the same dragon species but contained a major difference in their basic power levels. There simply was no comparison between a pureblood flood dragon and a deepwater black serpent. If poisonous dragon water control flag was nourished with a young flood dragon's blood, the level of its power was bound to rise dramatically. Young flood dragon and dragon essence, both are mine. Yishuan made up his mind, but in order to obtain them, he must defeat those extremely high-handed top players of the younger generation and the older generation. Yishuan had already made up his mind, was prepared to face all those people in front of him. He wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone, not even the god or the Buddha would escape his wrath if they were to stand between him and his goal. The old patron saint's words had made it quite apparent to everyone a while ago that in order to obtain the dragon essence, it was necessary to first get rid of the flood dragon. Humph! The first one to attack was the Jin young master of genie guards. He took out a huge fan, and suddenly out of nowhere, a giant sierra smashed down upon flood dragon's body. The impact directly crushed some of the dragon's scales, making it roar again and again in pain. This was called Shan. This class of magical weapons had many such weapons, but Jin young masters might added to its own, and with each movement of the fan, the mountains and rivers slammed down one after another directly upon the flood dragon without giving it any respite. However, this flood dragon was really very fearful, and it seemed like it did not have any declining tendency. Instead, it continued its frenzy all the while. At this time, the black-robed powerhouse launched a powerful strike, releasing a rippling sword ki that rushed out horizontally and cut into the flood dragon's body. And the old patron saint finally went into action as well and called forth a massive hand print that fell down from the sky. The members of Destruction Army also jumped into the battle, filling the entire sky with their murderous aura. This was like the reincarnation of a killing star, not to mention it seriously took big enough courage in one's heart to rush into a face-to-face battle with this flood dragon. Yishuan was also unwilling to be outdone by them. In his hand appeared a heavenly golden sword, intention burning crazily, and then shot up high into the sky. The world changed color and everyone was impressed by Yishuan at this instant. One must know that although sword intention and sword chi had only a mismatch of one word, but the two were not the same thing in any way. Just like Jin Yuan and sword ki were in itself different from each other. One was just a scattered form of energy while the other had a condensed form and was also shape-specific. The so-called sword intention was an artistic conception, an idea condition of a sword technique that could be congealed any time after having comprehended the same earlier. So, there was an absolute need for an expert to comprehend their sword skills to as far as they could go until reaching the epitome of sword arts. Although the black-robed powerhouse's rippling sword ki was strong, it was still only sword ki. Many people saw the sword intention in Yi Zaiwen's hand and were immediately vigilant of him. This Yishuan was certainly not an ordinary expert, but they actually did not know that he could congeal sword intention because he learned it from watching a tyrannical old sword master use the same attack. That sword master's sword skills were really out of this world. Yishuan had managed to just deconstruct a part of the ideal condition he saw back then to be able to achieve his current sword intention attack. Regarding uniting a part of the soul into the sword intention was simply not possible for Yishuan to achieve at his current level. In fact, he did not even know the level requirement for that type of accomplishment. Yi Zaiwen's sword intention penetrated straight through tough dragon scales, further penetrating into its flesh. This caused its blood to splash out as it roared out uncomfortably in pain. Yishuan managed to score one effective attack against this dragon and opened the first wound on its body. The experts saw Yishuan in action and finally understood that even though this dragon was very difficult to deal with, it was not impossible to slay it. In fact, even if they were individually not its opponent but by joining forces, they could still cherish the hope of making this dragon learn the meaning of pain and hatred. Suddenly everyone was greatly encouraged, and with a boosted morale, they bellowed and rushed toward the dragon in abundance. Roar! The flood dragon received a barrage of attacks from several experts, including the top players of the younger generation. It suddenly started roaring, and its roars were so tyrannical that it seemed as if space itself would collapse. The earth was moving and a cluster of dark clouds had started to gather up in the sky. Within the thick layers of dense clouds, one could see the shadow of a seemingly endless thunder dragon seething with excitement. According to the legend, the dragons had the ability to control the forces of nature, and a flood dragon would do well in the department of water manipulation and weather control. With the world's imperial symbol, a flood dragon had a considerable amount of abilities that were attributed to the mythical dragons mentioned in the fables. In a blink of an eye, heavy rains started pouring down in the form of torrential rains, while each and every drop turned into ice and hailed upon the experts. Numerous electric dragons were lurking in the clouds and penetrating through the layers of ice to strike the people underneath. This flood dragon's magical powers were just ridiculously strong. These hailstones and electric dragons were aiming for the experts and hacking them down relentlessly, but Yishuan simply disregarded them entirely. Tianyuan mirror was floating above his head and protecting him from those attacks. Not even a hint of these attacks was able to reach his body. In fact, before crossing the heavenly tribulation, he might have been worried about such a large-scale attack, but right now, they did not pose any threat to him. Clang! Yishuan immediately issued the sword intention attack, which instantly burst into a terrifying golden beam of sword light and directly crashed into the flood dragon's scales. The mind-blowing explosion set off raging tides of boundless energy in all directions. Kaka! The scales within a radius of several meters couldn't sustain the impact of Yizaiwan's sword intention and instantly disintegrated, turning into powder, followed by the sword intention condensing into a long sword and piercing all the way into the flesh of the flood dragon. Puchi! The flood dragon's blood spattered out like a fountain of water. Yizaiwan's body immediately released a golden light that went forth, enclosed the young dragon's blood and brought it back to be absorbed by the poisonous dragon water control flag. Almost in an instant, the flag array shook vigorously and horrifying rays of light exploded out of it. The greeting from dragon blood had such a reaction, and Yishuan barely managed to stop the souls of deepwater black serpents from flying out of the flag array. It seemed like they were really excited and all set to make trouble. Fortunately, he quickly pinned them down inside the flag array and stopped them from popping out. Ha, this is really useful, Yishuan. The metaphysics of this baby flood dragon is absolutely useful for the evolution of poisonous dragon water control flag array. Yemo said with a smile, this baby dragon comes from the true blood species of dragons, and is certainly not like that deepwater black serpent king who was going to transform into a flood dragon after stepping into the legendary realm. This baby flood dragon has such a large body and has the blood of a true dragon flowing in its veins. Its blood and essence should be more than enough to make all your deepwater black serpents evolve into legendary level flood dragons. Yishuan nodded. The flood dragon felt an intense piercing pain and immediately moved its sierra-like tail across the expansive sky, pumping out whistling winds everywhere. The fast-moving tail left behind a vacuum in its path, and the experts that were planning the siege from behind had no time to escape. They lost their lives in a flash. The display of such inhuman force scared off several experts who pulled out immediately after witnessing the death of several of their own. Yishuan also did not dare to be negligent. Although this was only a young flood dragon that was at the peak of legendary 3rd stage, but considering its origins, its powerful body, and inexplicable magical powers, it could easily contend with the experts of legendary 4th stage. Yishuan moved his footsteps and his body was wrapped in golden clothes, along with a pair of devil wings appearing behind him. In a blink of an eye, he disappeared from the spot in a golden flash of light and appeared several meters away, avoiding the flood dragon's attack quite effortlessly. Even if this young flood dragon was under large-scale siege, its terror was still incomparable. However, almost immediately, others immediately filled the lacking position of Yishuan in the fight and engaged the dragon. Right now, not everyone wanted to fight with the dragon, but if they did not kill it now, then they were probably going to die. This was a you die or I die kind of battle, and everyone was putting their lives on the line at the moment. Without a hint of hesitation, Yishuan immediately reinvested himself into the battle once again and started attacking the young flood dragon. It seemed as if everyone had gone crazy, whether it was for the young flood dragon or the dragon essence. Their bloodshot eyes were fixated on their targets, and in any event, the young flood dragon was a common obstacle for all, a barrier that needed to be eradicated at the earliest. This flood dragon was surrounded by a huge crowd of experts and miserably battered, had no way to break out of the tight encirclement, and each time it tried to break out, that resulted in the death of an expert. It was a peerless yet ominous beast, extremely terrifying. However, even though this flood dragon was very powerful, it still couldn't contend with so many of top-tier powerhouses, including an expert like Yi Shiwen who would be considered outstanding among human experts. There were many top players of the younger generation, with each having their own inheritance of terror, and at this time, all of them joined forces to take down that young flood dragon. Its power began to exhaust slowly, and there were patches of blood stains all over its body. It was losing more and more blood, and one of its legs was almost cut down by that black-robed mysterious powerhouse. The young flood dragon was gasping heavily like an ox, and both of its eyes were red. At this time, everyone was kind of happy in their heart, as they knew that this baby dragon had reached its exhausted state and was only drawing its last breaths. Boom! Yi Shiwen summoned the Han seal that transformed into a huge mountain range and directly smashed down upon the flood dragon with the contained force of hundreds of millions of units. The flood dragon couldn't resist the impact and was directly pounded onto the ground. The flood dragon opened its big mouth and spouted pure dragon blood. Die! After shooting a shaking sword intention up into the sky, Yi Shiwen opened the devil wings behind his back and immediately flew towards the flood dragon. He arrived right above the dragon's head. A sword intention instantly blossomed in a flash with a burst of wind and was issued toward the young dragon's head. The collision left the scales on its head in a completely shattered state. Boom! With the loud sound of an explosion, the sword intention in Yi Shiwen's hand had pierced the flood dragon's head. Dash! Chapter 310, Battle with the Fifth God. The young flood dragon's body started twitching frantically as its entire brain was churned and minced by Yi Shiwen's sword intention attack. Even its soul was annihilated in the process. It finally stopped moving anymore and left this world. This dragon essence belongs to the army of God. Encircle it! The fifth god shouted loudly, and just like a thoroughly rehearsed army answering to a great general's command, the army of God huddled in a fence around the dragon essence. The fifth god's figure rushed forward like a fine strand of rainbow light in the sky, instantly toward the dragon essence to take it in his grasp. The dragon essence belongs to this old man. The old patron saint sneered and immediately broke through the encirclement of the army of God. He sent many of the army members flying, while several of them had their bones directly crushed. They just couldn't stop the old patron saint, and those who actually tried lost their lives. Boom! A big hand made its way toward the dragon essence to seize it. You dare to snatch my dragon essence! The fifth god thundered angrily. The long halberd in his hand sparkled all of a sudden and released bright rays of light that resembled stars in the night sky. Just like a wicked dragon, it immediately flew toward the old man's big hand to block it. His cultivation had recently reached the second stage of half-step legendary realm, and the resulting outcome of that was completely apparent to all. His tyrannical power caused the space in front of him to collapse, disintegrating into the chaos on the other side. Bang! With a loud noise that sounded like the collision between gold and iron, the long halberd tore its way into the big hand, making huge amounts of lingqi to leak out crazily and overflow everywhere. A startling rainbow-colored sky sword flashed in the sky. The black-robed powerhouse was attempting to nab the dragon essence like every other powerhouse on the scene. Humph! Jin Youngmaster also rushed in and unleashed the wrath of the fan of mountains and rivers. Several hidden experts of the older generation, with many having a profound cultivation of legendary second stage, also rushed over to snatch the dragon essence. In fact, some of them had deeper cultivation than that of Humaniang et al. Also, there were many people who knew that they didn't have a chance to obtain the dragon essence. Instead, they were interested in seizing the young flood dragon's corpse. They suddenly rushed toward the dragon corpse but were startled to find a figure approaching faster. All of a sudden, a huge golden hand congealed out of nowhere and grasped that flood dragon's corpse in one go. Yes, it was Yi Zaiwenho successfully captured the dragon corpse. He tactically chose to go after the dragon corpse before dragon essence because with so many top players in the battlefield, competing over dragon essence, it was certainly going to take a long time to reach the final outcome, so might as well just go for the dragon corpse now and join the fray later on, preferably in its last phase. Right after the young flood dragon's corpse was received into the Tianyuan mirror, it immediately began to dismember the huge and extract massive amounts of its essence to be fed to the poisonous dragon water control flag. Listen everyone, let's kill Yi Zaiwen and recapture the young flood dragon's corpse. At this time, an expert mustered his strength and raised his voice from the crowd without knowing whether he would be successful in provoking the crowd's mood against Yishiwen. Yes Yishiwen, you alone cannot keep an entire dragon corpse, you're just being too greedy. A warrior said indignantly. I was the first to snatch it, so naturally it is mine. What did you all expect? I killed the dragon, hence I get to keep its corpse. Yi Zaiwen smiled coldly as he said that. The young dragon's corpse was of great significance to him, like hell he would hand it over to anyone. They would have to give up the idea altogether. Come on, let's kill him already. Just think, not only can we recapture the young flood dragon's corpse from him but can also get his secret treasures. Henceforth, everything will go soaring up for us. A sharp voice sounded from the crowd but no one knew who proposed that. However, even before his voice fell, Yi Zaiwen snorted and a shaking sword kick condensed high up in the sky and fell down upon the crowd of experts. Boom! The target of this sword ki attack was an expert, who was at the first stage of half-step legendary realm and right now was hidden in the crowd. However, he still couldn't prevent his body from getting penetrated by the sword ki as it nailed him directly to the ground. Have the ability and guts to stand up and say it to my face. Yi Zaiwen clamored in a calm yet cold voice. He was paying attention to the source of the voice that was trying to stir up the crowd against Yishiwen. Of course, if all these people were instigated to attack Yi Zaiwen, then the situation might go out of hand. The people were speechless, looking at each other, not sure about what just happened. A moment ago, someone said something from the crowd but no one expected that he would be killed by Yi Zaiwen so promptly. Some experts recognized that he was an expert with the cultivation level of half-step legendary realm's first stage and could be counted among the strongest experts present in the crowd, but even so, he was crucified by Yi Zaiwen's sword. Yi Zaiwen's power had simply gone beyond their imagination. They were not stupid and just did not know how they gotten sitted a moment ago into thinking that they could take down Yishiwen. But now they were also saving their thoughts. The so-called law does not punish numerous offenders. If everyone joined forces and together attacked Yi Zaiwen, then there might have been a chance of forcing Yi Zaiwen to hand over the dragon corpse. However, it took Yi Zaiwen just one sword strike to cut down all their thoughts and intentions. When an expert of half-step legendary first stage didn't stand a chance against Yi Zaiwen and his sword, there was no way someone else would dare to rush toward the absolute demise. The crowd was neither moving forward nor was it retreating. Everyone wanted to have one person to take the lead, but no one wanted to be that leader. No one was willing to stand out and challenge the possibility of taking the fall for all. The fate of that previous warrior was for all to see. Indeed, Yi Zaiwen might not be able to kill them all, but he would certainly kill off all the leading ones quite effortlessly. Fortunately, the status quo between them and Yi Zaiwen didn't go for long, and before it might take a turn for the worse, all of a sudden, from the side of the battlefield where contention over the dragon essence was going on, a big golden hand rose up, blotting out the sky, and went toward Yishiwen. Humph, Yishiwen! The fifth god roared. Holding his halberd upright, he rushed across the expansive sky, all the way toward Yishiwen. Each of his steps was opening void in the space, wild magical power was surging everywhere. People who watched this felt as if they were looking at the reincarnation of some ancient god. He was just too fast. Almost instantaneously, he arrived in front of Yishiwen, pulling a long shadow behind him. His golden-colored Jin Yuan was surging and boiling around him. His power level was also seething and had already reached the peak. His presence truly resembled that of a brave general. Yishuan, time to die, said the fifth god in an ice-cold voice, and it seemed as if the halberd in his hands was about to break the world itself, bringing about the rebirth of chaos in this world as it punctured forward to stab Yishuan. It was truly a frightening scene. Yizaiwen directly withdrew from the current spot he was at, then thundered loudly and instantly put on his divine golden clothing, releasing waves of qi in all directions, as if to sweep away the universe. Layer after layer of formidable golden divinities was surging everywhere, appearing like a golden tide. Amidst all this, Yizaiwen released an earth-shaking Bladaki and swept it away. At this moment, Yizaiwen went all out so as to not leave any margin for error. Boom! The long halberd and the long blade's tip collided with each other. It seemed like the sudden formation of mahjong tiles, which was a result of an instant rupturing of the surrounding space as it crumbled down into a landslide of fragments. The entire space just exploded in the end. The experts suddenly looked at Yizaiwen with incomparable amazement. Only a while ago, they were planning to snatch the dragon's corpse away from Yizaiwen, but what they just saw made them feel helpless. The fifth god's power was enough to sweep away everything in front of Yizaiwen but still couldn't make him budge at all. The fifth god's pupils suddenly contracted as his complexion turned pale. He was confident that after having stepped into the second stage of half-step legendary realm, he would have more than enough power to beat Yishuan. He never expected for Yizaiwen to have grown so strong, perhaps even stronger than him. Yishuan, I will end your life today. The fifth god immediately resumed his calm. His facial expression turned ice-cold as he was staring at Yizaiwen with his knife-like sharp gaze. The long halberd moved in his hands and shot a black-colored light straight toward Yishuan. Boom! The long halberd set off boundless coercion, as if piercing the void itself, and released a murderous aura that went across the sky, all the way toward Yishuan. Yishuan, without hesitation, took a step and a burst of golden divinities seeped out of his body and swept out like a dreadful golden tide. It seemed as if the long blade in his hand was roaring like a golden dragon. Boom! This battle was shaking the heaven and earth, the explosions were collapsing the surrounding space, and waves of killing intention was sweeping everywhere in the sky. In fact, a large of space had already collapsed under the aftermath of collisions between their attacks. This was a terrifying matchup. Several experts felt amazed while watching this battle. Even though they were at the same level, they still weren't a match for those two. Yishuan, drop dead. The fifth god tightly clenched his steel-like teeth and thundered out these words from his throat. His long halberd went toward Yishuan, striking again with unparalleled black light. If you are only at such level, then today, even if the great golden immortal descends to this world, he cannot save you. Yizaiwen shouted loudly, and his long blade shot an even larger blade light toward the incoming attack. This time, he didn't restrain himself and went all out, instantly issuing an exceptionally fearful attack. Shwa! The halberd and blade attacks intersected, horrifying ripples of terror proliferated from those sophisticated weapons and spread out, sweeping the surrounding region, as if even the vacuum was crushed as a result. The dreadful explosion set off layer after layer of energy waves in all directions. Boom! The fifth god only felt a terrifying power boiling and making its way through his long halberd before invading his hands. Bang! The fifth god was holding the halberd in both his hands before his hands fell prey to Yizaiwen's terrifying attack. Blood began to gush out of his hands, revealing cracks and bones through the open wounds. How is this possible? With an incredible look in his eyes, the fifth god found it extremely hard to believe what just happened. One must know that a month ago, in his battle with Yishuan, he clearly had an upper hand in the battle. But in such a short period of time, only after a month's time, the tables actually turned in Yizaiwen's favor. Yizaiwen not just caught up to him but actually surpassed him. This was simply hard to believe, just like a miracle. One must know that although the fifth god had recently reached the second stage of half-step legendary realm and was actually like a newbie on the new stage, he could easily defeat a majority of the senior experts of the same level. During that blow just now, if I am not mistaken, didn't it appear like the fifth god actually fell under the wind? Good gracious! This is insane. Only a month ago, the fifth god Clear had an upper hand, but now he appears to be losing. How is this even possible? At this time, several warriors were discussing among themselves, finding it very hard to believe that illustrious fifth god was being forced down to a disadvantageous position. How dare you hurt me, die! The fifth god bellowed, his halberd rumbled once again. The wound on hand did not seem to hinder his pace at all as he almost instantaneously arrived in front of Yi Zaiwen once again. The end. Yi Zaiwen said indifferently and struck with his long blade, seemingly delimiting the trajectory of a meteor falling from the sky. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.